Chapter 904. Chu Luiwei, who was still in the palace, did not know about the news of Rong Xiu's arrival in the West Hill. After comforting her father with great difficulty, she went straight to the Huayang Palace. The once bustling Huayang Palace was now deserted. Apart from the Black Cavalry, who were strictly guarding the inside and outside, there was not even a palace servant to serve. Chu Luiwei walked straight into the main hall of the Huayang Palace. After entering the room, she was hit by an unpleasant smell. The whole room was a mess and extremely dirty, and in the pile of rubbish, she could barely see a person lying down. It was Shang Wanwan. Because there was no one to take care of her injuries, they repeatedly festered and festered. But every day, Chi Han would specially come over and feed her an elixir to keep her alive. In this way, she could not die or fall into a coma. She could only bear this terrible torture with a clear mind. There was no distinction between day and night, and there was no end to it. Hearing the sound, Shang Wanwan thought that Chi Han had come, and she did not move. Anyway, she did not have the strength to struggle. She could only live like this every day. After these few days of torment, she no longer had any thoughts in her heart. Her only thought was that she would be lucky one day and die directly. "Looks like you're doing well." A familiar voice sounded. Shang Wanwan was shocked. She looked up in horror and realized that the person who came was actually Chu Luiwei. Today, she was wearing a simple and elegant white dress. Her black hair was like clouds, and she only wore a peach blossom hairpin on her head. At a glance, she looked pure and noble. She was lovely and moving. Who would have thought that such a person would use such cruel means to force her, Shang Wanwan, into such a hopeless situation? The surrounding filth seemed to have nothing to do with her. She stood there as if she was high and mighty. Shang Wanwan knew that she was back. She was really back. "What were you doing here?" Shang Wanwan struggled to spit out a sentence, but it was weak. Chu Luiwei smiled faintly. "This consort is here to ask you, who exactly was the soul that escaped that day? What was its relationship with you? And how much did it help you?" Shang Wanwan was silent for a while. "I can tell you, but if I do, you have to promise me that you'll kill me." She really couldn't continue living like this. Chu Luiwei raised her brows, and a smile appeared in her eyes. "Do you think you still have the qualifications to negotiate with me? If you want to say it, then say it. If you don't want to say it, I have plenty of time to wait." After saying that, she turned around, as if intending to leave just like that. Seeing how straightforward she was, Shang Wanwan also panicked. "Wait, I'll talk. I'll tell you now." As if she was afraid that Chu Luiwei would go back on his word, she took a deep breath and said everything she wanted to say. "I also don't know when that person appeared in my body. I also don't know who he is. All these years, he was the one who instigated me to do those things. Back then, he was also the one who hinted to me to harm you. And the method to repair your Yuan Meridian." Chu Luiwei narrowed his eyes and thought for a moment. "Back then, when you attacked those people in Dawang Swamp, he was the one who taught you?" Yes. "In that case, he was already hostile to me. So he manipulated you to do those things?" "That's right. If it wasn't for him, I definitely wouldn't have the guts. I swear." Chu Luiwei paused for a moment as many thoughts flashed through her mind. Seeing Shang Wanwan like this, what she said should be true. She had deliberately locked her up and left her out for a few days to torture her. On one hand, she wanted her to repay the debt from back then. On the other hand, she wanted to push her to the brink of collapse so that she would tell the truth. At this point, there was no need for her to lie. It seemed that she wouldn't be able to get anything out of her in this regard. Chu Luiwei was a little disappointed. That person was very powerful. It was also within her expectations that Shang Wanwan would be controlled by him. Perhaps she didn't know that person as well as the Taizu did. "Was it your idea to attack me, or Jiang Yuqing's?" Chu Luiwei changed the question. "It was his idea. He came to me of his own accord and said that he liked me, and said that he wanted to be with me forever." Shang Wanwan's voice gradually trembled as she spoke. She felt like a fool who had been played in the palm of Jiang Yuqing's hand without realizing it. Unfortunately, back then, she had secretly given her heart to Jiang Yuqing. How could she tell the truth from a lie? When he came to me, he had already started to poison you. From the beginning to the end, the one who wanted to kill you was Jiang Yuqing. Although I hate you, I don't have the means or the guts to do it. Speaking of which, I'm just his assistant at best. If you want to take revenge, just go and find him. With that said, Shang Wanwan laughed at herself. It's ridiculous to say that in his study, there's a portrait of you from 10 years ago. From the day you became of marriageable age, he liked you. But in the end, didn't he still try to kill you? Chu Luiwei didn't say anything. She couldn't bear Jiang Yuqing's so-called love. But as for why he did this, she was afraid that she would have to find him and ask him personally to know. Thinking of this, Chu Luiwei turned around and left. Shang Wanwan hurriedly called out to her, wanting her to end herself, but Chu Luiwei's figure had already disappeared. In the end, Shang Wanwan's voice was so hoarse that it almost bled. Gradually, she fainted again. Not long after, Chi Han came over and woke her up again. She had to endure the pain and torture that seemed to never stop. Chu Luiwei didn't care about everything that happened in the main hall. The 13th had been by her side for a long time, so she naturally helped her take care of many things. After leaving the door, she turned around and entered the side hall. Jiang Yuqing was among them. His situation wasn't much better than Shang Wanwan's, but his mental state was much better than Shang Wanwan's. Hearing the sound, he slowly turned his head. Seeing that familiar yet strange face, his heart moved slightly, and a wave of emotion rose in his eyes. Chu Luiwei didn't dress up today, but after regaining her identity, she didn't hide her aura anymore, adding a bit of coldness and nobility. Even if she was only wearing a simple long dress, she was still so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off her. Jiang Yuqing didn't know if it was an illusion, but he vaguely felt that Chu Luiwei seemed to be more and more similar to the Shang Wanyu of the past. In the past, there were only 20% of her facial features and 30% of her expression, so there was a total of 50% similarity. But now, the girl's gradually opened appearance had 70% of the charm of the past. Especially when Shang Wanyu was the same age back then, it was as if they were carved out of the same mold. In this world, could there really be two people who looked so similar? Or was it because the core inside had changed, so they were more similar? Chu Luiwei didn't know what he was thinking at this time, so she went straight to the point. I'm here today to ask you something. Did I ever tell you to cancel the engagement? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 905. Jiang Yuqing's pupils constricted, and a glimmer of light flashed across his eyes. After a moment, he said, "No." Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. Actually, on the night she revealed her identity and officially ascended the throne, she had a very long dream. The entire dream was fragmented, with only a few incoherent fragments. After waking up, she had forgotten most of it, only vaguely remembering a few scenes. Other than the octagonal pavilion by the cliff that she had seen at the beginning, there were many unfamiliar scenes in the dream. She had never been to those places, but for some reason, they felt very familiar. More importantly, she remembered the details of some of the scenes clearly. It was as if she had seen them before. After waking up, she tried to draw these scenes, but as soon as she picked up the brush, she almost completely forgot. She couldn't even draw a blurry outline. Other than the octagonal pavilion on the cliff, everything else became blurry. Other than that, the clearest was Thousand View Garden. She dreamed that she was standing by the lake, and Jiang Yuqing was standing in front of her. She seemed to have said something, and there were a few sensitive words. Engagement, cancellation, agreement. After waking up, Chu Luiwei thought for a long time. She felt that this dream wasn't completely a dream. There were many things in it that might be related to the part of her memories that she had lost. If all of that really happened before, I guess that I went to find Jiang Yuqing back then to cancel the marriage agreement. After waiting for a few days, she finally came here to see him and asked this question. But she didn't expect Jiang Yuqing to say that he didn't. Chu Luiwei didn't quite believe it. Really? Jiang Yuqing looked at her doubtful expression, and for some reason, a subtle smile suddenly appeared on his face. Now that things have come to this, why would I lie to you about such things? Back then, She indeed didn't mention canceling the engagement, because at that time, they had just agreed to pick a time to set the engagement, but before they could do it, she found him again and proposed canceling the engagement, because she said that she had someone she liked. But in the end, the engagement was still set. But that was in the future. For her to ask such a question, it was obvious that she couldn't remember what had happened back then at all. Jiang Yuqing didn't intend to explain, nor was he interested in repeating what had happened back then. After all, in his opinion, those experiences weren't worth recalling or remembering. Chu Luiyue stared at Jiang Yuqing, repeatedly thinking about the truth of his words. Yesterday, the Jiang family's residence was sealed. She suddenly changed the topic. Jiang Yuqing's face froze for a moment, but it was gone in the blink of an eye. Only a faint redness could be seen in his eyes. But his overall expression, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. In fact, he had already expected all of this from the moment he was escorted to watch the beheading of the Jiang clan 2 days ago. Or rather, from the day he decided to make a move on her, he had thought of such a situation. However, in the past, he had always been confident and thought that he would never fail. What was even more unexpected was that she actually came back alive. They all died because of you. Chu Luiyue looked at him. Your sister, Jiang Yuji, was still calling your name before she died. You should have heard it, right? The veins on Jiang Yuqing's forehead throbbed. Of course he heard it, and he heard it clearly. At that time, blood flowed all over the ground. The originally lively lives were all gone in the blink of an eye, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Jiang Yuqing slowly closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the emotions in his eyes had completely dissipated, leaving only coldness. The winner is king, and the loser is a bandit. This is your revenge on me. I'll just accept it. No matter how much he begged for mercy or tried to save himself, he was powerless to change the situation, usurping the throne and committing all kinds of crimes. Not to mention Chu Luiyue. Anyone related to this would not let him off easily. Moreover, his pill of essence was shattered, and he was covered in wounds. He was worse than an ordinary person. What else could he do except for anger and grief? However, all of this was actually useless. It would only cause him more pain. After becoming numb, he felt much better. Chu Luiyue smiled. Jiang Yuqing was rather open-minded. Or rather, he was cold and selfish enough. It was clearly because of him that thousands of people in the Jiang family were implicated. However, in the end, he didn't seem to have any remorse. That was because he didn't care about those people at all. Even if they were his parents and his biological sister, he still cared about himself the most, even though he felt a little heartache for them. If someone else was involved in this matter, they would have committed suicide long ago because they couldn't bear the pressure of self-blame and guilt. However, Jiang Yuqing didn't. From his perspective, he was indeed someone important. If he didn't have some temperament and capabilities, how could he have made all the preparations silently back then and betrayed me in one fell swoop? I found this in your study room. Chu Luiyue suddenly took out a rectangular wooden box. As he was worried that the Jiang family might have left something dangerous behind, Qin Yi also went with them during the search. After that, he sent this over. Upon seeing the wooden box, Jiang Yuqing's expression cracked for a moment. Chu Luiyue glanced at him, opened the wooden box, and took out a painting. With a light flick of his wrist, the painting instantly unfurled. There was a woman drawn on it. It was Shangwan Yu back then. Chu Luiyue was also a little shocked when he saw this painting. From the looks of this painting and the signature on it, it was drawn by Jiang Yuqing on the day of her coming-of-age ceremony back then. Previously, Shang Wanwan mentioned that Jiang Yuqing had missed her for 10 years. This was probably what she was referring to. Chu Luiyue half-smiled. I didn't know that you would actually leave such a painting behind after what you did to me back then. Jiang Yuqing's face turned pale for a moment, as if someone had exposed his long-buried secret. A trace of embarrassment flashed across his eyes. He admitted that he liked her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to that marriage agreement back then. However, for some reason, this painting made him very embarrassed when she suddenly took it out like this. Don't worry. I'm not interested in your yearning for the past 10 years. Chu Luiyue spoke lazily, but his gaze was as sharp as a knife. What this consort wants to ask is, when exactly and why did you decide to betray this consort? In this world, there's no such thing as love or hatred for no reason. Chu Luiyue didn't really believe that Jiang Yuqing did this for the sake of the throne. If he married her, he would still be able to obtain the power he wanted. The more he liked her back then, the more it showed that this betrayal was filled with shocking temptation. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI. Net. Chapter 906. In the face of Chu Luiyue's questioning, Jiang Yuqing chose to remain silent. His mouth was tightly shut, and he refused to say anything. He even shifted his gaze and turned around, as if he didn't intend to continue chatting with Chu Luiyue. Snap! Chu Luiyue snapped her fingers. A cluster of crimson flames rose from between his fingers, and the painting was instantly set ablaze. Jiang Yuqing heard the commotion and suddenly turned around. When he saw this scene, the veins on his forehead throbbed fiercely. Since he refused to speak, then there's no need to continue chatting. As for this painting, you should have burned it on the day you decided to kill this consort. Chu Luiyue's tone was cold and resolute. Seeing this painting would only make her feel more disgusted. Who was he pretending to be infatuated with her all these years? If he still had the slightest bit of sincerity, he wouldn't have done those things back then. Absurd, laughable. The painting was quickly devoured by the flames, and finally turned to ashes. When the last bit of starlight was extinguished, Jiang Yuqing's face flickered for a moment. He seemed to want to snatch the painting, but in the end, he didn't do anything. Chu Luiyue gave him a meaningful look, then turned and left. After her figure disappeared, the room once again regained its deathly silence. Not long after, there was a burst of mournful and tragic cries coming from the main hall next to them. A trace of disgust appeared on Jiang Yuqing's face. It was Shang Wanwan's cry, as if it was time for her to be tortured again. Almost every day, there would be such a cry. Without looking, it wasn't hard to imagine what kind of terrible pain the owner of this voice was going through. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a burning pain in his heart. His face paled, and he slowly bent over. After dealing with these matters, Chu Luiyue planned to return to Xiaoyu Hall first. Although her status was different from before, she still lived in her previous palace. Just as she reached the entrance of Xiaoyu Hall, she saw a familiar figure. Chang Wanzhou. He seemed to be waiting for her. When he heard her footsteps, he raised his head and looked over. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised and walked over. Xiaozhou, why are you back so soon? Previously, she had asked Chang Wanzhou to do her a favor, to return to country Yaochun and bring Chu Ning over. When she left Yaochun, Chu Ning only knew that she came to the Tianling dynasty with Mu Qinghe, but she didn't know that she came back for revenge. Naturally, she didn't know her true identity either. Now that the dust had settled, she planned to invite Chu Ning over for a reunion and tell him the truth. The previous Chu Luiyue was already dead, and the one living in this body had long been replaced by her. Even though it was too cruel for a father to say this, it was unavoidable. Now that she had regained her identity in Tianling, she could no longer pretend to be Chu Luiyue. She had already thought it through. As long as Chu Ning was willing, she would be his daughter for the rest of her life. Whether he wanted to stay in Xiling or return to Yaochun in the end, she would respect his choice and do her best to accompany and take care of him. After her rebirth, although she had only been with Chu Ning for less than a year, she had long regarded Chu Ning as her real father. Chu Luiyue only realized that Chang Wanzhou's expression was a little strange when she walked up to him. She suddenly felt a sense of unease. Then, she heard Chang Wanzhou say, "Lord Chu Ning is missing." There was dead silence in the study of Xiaoyu Hall. Chu Luiyue sat at the head of the table, while Chang Wanzhou stood 5 steps in front of her. The air was so cold that it seemed to be freezing inch by inch. In that case, he was already missing when you arrived at the Imperial capital of Yaochun? Chang Wanzhou nodded. Yes, I asked around, and they all said that Lord Chu Ning went to Tianling alone a month ago. They said that. He received your letter. I heard that many people were envious. However, I went to Heaven's Canopy to check, and there was no trace of Lord Chu Ning. Although Chang Wanzhou had never seen Chu Ning before, Chu Luiyue had drawn a portrait for him long ago. As long as he saw him, he would definitely recognize him at a glance. Moreover, he was powerful and agile. He also had many trump cards. Even if he acted alone, Chu Luiyue could rest assured. She thought that everything was arranged properly, but she never expected that Chu Ning was no longer in Yaochun. I never wrote a letter to father asking him to come to Xiling. Chu Yuyue's face was cold, as if covered with a thin layer of frost. If this rumor was true, then who was the one who sent the letter to him? If this rumor was false, it would be even more troublesome. It meant that they didn't even know where Chu Ning went. The world was so big. Finding a person was like finding a needle in a haystack. Chu Luiyue frowned, and her mind raced. Call Chi Han over. The moment Chi Han entered the room, he felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. Your Highness. He cupped his fists and bowed respectfully. Chu Luiyue didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, Chi Han, you've been in charge of the letters between father and I, right? Chi Han was stunned and immediately said, yes. Other than the first letter I wrote to father to tell him that I'm safe, I didn't write a second one. Has there been a letter from father? Chu Luiyue paused and tapped her fingers on the table. According to the news that Xiaozhou found out, father had already set off for West Hill a month ago because he received my letter. However, there was no trace of him until now. When Chi Han heard this, he also realized the seriousness of the matter. He pondered carefully for a while. There's no. Just as he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression froze. Previously, Miss Mu's father and mother had written a letter, and this subordinate had passed it to young Master Jian. Is there anything written in that letter? Chu Luiyue thought for a moment, then got up and walked outside. Chu Luiyue was extremely fast and headed straight for Dragon Teeth Mountain. When she reached the foot of the mountain, the disciple on guard saw someone coming and was about to stop her when she took off her hood, revealing a gorgeous face. Where's Jian Fengqi? Chu Luiyue had been here before. In addition to the Wanzhong competition and the sect meeting, many people knew her. Recently, because of her shocking identity, everyone in Xiling was talking about her. They didn't expect her to suddenly appear here at this time. Greetings, your Highness. The two hurriedly bowed, but halfway through, they remembered that she was now an emperor and quickly changed their greetings. Young Master is on the mountain today. I'll take you there. No need. I'll go personally. Chu Luiyue said and hurried up the mountain. When she was halfway up the mountain, she happened to meet Mu Hongyu. When she saw Chu Luiyue, Mu Hongyu was pleasantly surprised. Luyu, why are you here? She rushed over and was about to pounce on Chu Luiyue when she hurriedly stopped. She had almost forgotten that Luyu was no longer Luyu. Chu Luiyue grabbed her hand. In the letter that your father and mother sent you, did they mention my father? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 907. Mu Hongyu was stunned. I think it was mentioned. Wait a minute. As she spoke, she rummaged through her interspatial ring and took out a letter after a short while. She had always been very careful with the letters from Yaochun. This letter was handed to me by young Master a few days ago. As Mu Hongyu spoke, she handed the letter over. It only mentioned one sentence. Chu Luiyue opened the letter and skimmed through it. As expected, she saw a sentence at the end. It said that Chu Ning had received her letter and was planning to go to the West Hill to reunite with her. During that period of time, Mu Hongyu's parents had been staying in the capital. When they heard the news, they were very envious. They wanted to come and see Mu Hongyu, but after considering many factors, they couldn't go together. Chu Luiyue looked at the date. It was indeed a month ago. She frowned. The distance between the capital of Yaochun and the Tianling West Hill was more than tens of thousands of miles. Most importantly, there was also the Heavens Canopy. What kind of news did father receive to come to the West Hill so decisively? One had to know that with his strength, if no one led him, it would be impossible for him to find those teleportation arrays, let alone reach them safely. It was impossible for him not to understand these principles. But he still did it. Was it because he was confident, or because someone had helped him, or was he coerced? So much time had passed. I wonder how father is doing. Seeing Chu Yue's grave expression, Mu Hongyu also sensed that something was wrong. What's wrong? Is there a problem with Uncle? Chu Liyue briefly explained the matter to her. Mu Hongyu said in surprise, "You didn't ask him to come? I thought you really wrote a letter to invite him." When she received the letter, it was right after Chu Liyue announced his identity. At that time, she was still shocked that Chu Liyue was actually Shang Guanyu. So when she saw the letter, she naturally thought that Chu Liyue had already made preparations and planned to bring Chu Ning over after everything was settled. But now, it seemed that this was not the case at all. Chu Liyue's hand gripped the letter tightly. His brows furrowed as his mind raced. It was obvious that someone had deliberately used her name to make a move on her father. But who could it be? To be able to do this, the person must be someone from Heaven's Canopy. More importantly, the person must know her very well. Otherwise, the other party would never have thought of making a move on his father's side. Why was the other party doing this? Threatening her? But until now, she didn't seem to have received any news. If she hadn't sent Chang Wanzhou to Yao Chen this time, who knew when she would have found out about her father's disappearance? Why are you guys standing here? Just as the two of them fell silent, Jian Fengqi suddenly arrived. He waved the fan in his hand and walked over with a charming smile. However, his gaze fell on Chu Liyue and sized her up carefully, as if he had never seen her before. When he got closer, he put away his fan, cupped his fists, and bowed slightly. "Greetings, Your Majesty." He really didn't expect that Shang Guanyu wasn't dead back then, and had even returned with another identity. No wonder he always felt that Chu Liyue was very familiar. So it was her. Now that he saw her again, his mood was indeed very strange. Seeing that the two of them seemed a little serious, Chu Liyue was still holding the letter he had given to Mu Hongyu. It seemed like something had happened. What's going on? Jian Fengqi's gaze quickly scanned the duo's faces as he asked. Chu Liyue returned the letter to Mu Hongyu and briefly explained what had happened. Jian Fengqi gradually frowned and tapped his hand with a bone fan. "After you returned to West Hill, you have indeed offended many people, but there shouldn't be many who would think of harming Lord Chu Ning, right?" Although Chu Liyue had now ascended the throne, Jian Fengqi had always been bold and unrestrained. He had always been used to being free and unrestrained in front of her, so his words were still as unrestrained as before. Chu Liyue didn't mind and nodded slightly. "I thought that there would be some clues in this letter, but the content of the letter was similar to the information that Chang Wanzhou had found out. There weren't any more clues. Don't you have any way to find Lord Chu Ning?" Jian Fengqi asked curiously. Based on her usual prudence and intelligence, she should have been prepared for this. Moreover, when she left the Imperial capital and went to West Hill, which was thousands of miles away, she should have been more careful in this regard. Chu Liyue shook her head. It's too far away. She had indeed left something with Chu Ning so that it would be convenient for them to confirm each other's location and safety. However, the two of them were so far away now. How could they detect each other? Then the current solution is to try our best to find him. Jian Fengqi pondered for a moment. But I'm afraid this matter shouldn't be made public. To the current Chu Liyue, this matter could be said to be both simple and difficult at the same time. Now that she had regained her identity and the entire Tianling was under her control, it wasn't difficult for her to send someone to find the whereabouts of a person. However, the key was that Chu Ning's identity was somewhat special. He was the biological father of Chu Liyue's body. Chu Liyue's identity was different from before. Moreover, Shang Guanyu had regained consciousness and was living well in the palace. Thus, Chu Ning's existence became a little awkward. I've already sent someone to look for him in private, but the world is so big, and without any clues, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Seeing her worried expression, Mu Hongyu couldn't help but pat her hand gently. "Liu, don't worry. Uncle is a good person, and nothing will happen to him." Chu Liyue sighed softly. "I hope so." Jian Fengqi looked at the two of them overlapping hands at the side, and his eyes flickered slightly. Shang Guanyu was indeed different from before. In the past, when she was the Empress, although she was very amiable, she always carried a faint aura of alienation and nobility. Actually, it wasn't intentional. It was because she was too outstanding from the moment she was born, which caused her to have an indescribable sense of loneliness. Not to mention others. Almost none of the children in the Tianling royal family were very close to her. Everyone subconsciously looked up to her, so naturally, they distanced themselves from her. Perhaps it was because of this that she was so good to Shangwan Wan, who was closer to her back then. Even Mu Qinghe later, after returning from the tribulation, her personality had obviously changed a little. She had the most trusted friends and many things that she didn't have before. She seemed to have become a lot more real. Thinking of this, Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment before finally asking, "Have you seen Mu Qinghe?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 908. Chu Yoyue's eyelashes fluttered slightly as she looked up at him. "Not yet. What's the matter?" "It's nothing. I was just asking casually." Jian Fengqi clenched his fist and coughed against his lips. "I remember that you seem to have a good relationship with Mu Qinghe." Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows and asked. Jian Fengqi pouted in his heart. She kept saying "I" when she was talking to Mu Hongyu, and she sounded so affectionate. She addressed him as I the moment she spoke to him. Was she afraid that he wouldn't remember her current identity? After all, he had helped her a lot in the past. Why was she treating him differently now? However, he didn't dare to say this out loud. "Your Majesty remembered wrongly." Jian Fengqi averted his gaze and looked away. "Isn't Your Majesty the clearest about our relationship back then?" Chu Yoyue's lips curved up. "Yes, I still remember that when Hongyu's mother fell ill, Mu Qinghe directly asked you to go to Yaochun to help. If the two of them didn't have a strong relationship, how could someone like Jian Fengqi travel so far to help treat someone's illness?" Later on, Mu Qinghe directly entrusted her to Jian Fengqi and asked him to bring her back to Xiling. It was obvious that the two of them had a lot of private dealings and trusted each other very much. Wasn't it too late to say that their relationship wasn't good now? Jian Fengqi's face stiffened for a moment. How could he forget? Chu Luiyue also knew about those things back then. He remembered them clearly. Seeing that he couldn't deny it, Jian Fengqi could only speak vaguely. "If Your Majesty really wants to put it this way, there's nothing wrong with that. Mu Qinghe is the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry after all. His status isn't low and he holds great power. Isn't it normal for me to have a lot of dealings with him?" Chu Yue's smile deepened. It would have been fine if Jian Fengqi hadn't said that, but he did, which proved that he had a guilty conscience. She said slowly, "That's right. Oh, so that's how it is. But when I was the Emperor's concubine, didn't I have a higher status than him? Didn't you still not give me any face?" Why did she suddenly change her temperament? Jian Fengqi choked. It was rare for him to be at a loss for words. "If that's the case, then follow me to Mu Clan." Chu Luiyue lifted his chin slightly. "It just so happens that I have a lot of questions to ask you all." Jian Fengqi was filled with regret when he arrived at Mu Mansion and looked at the familiar door. Why couldn't he restrain himself from talking too much? If he hadn't taken the initiative to bring this up, he definitely wouldn't have been forcefully brought here. The Black Cavalry was still in charge of guarding Mu Mansion, but the previous batch of people who were Mu Qinghe's confidants had all been replaced. The guards standing in front of the door were shocked when they saw the two of them. However, no, she spared his life and didn't even give him any punishment. She just put him under house arrest in Mu Mansion. And here, except for the fact that he couldn't move freely and the people around him no longer obeyed his orders, everything else seemed to be the same as before. He vaguely guessed Chu Liuyue's plan, but she didn't come after waiting for several days. Until today. Moreover, she brought Jian Fengqi with her. Mu Qinghe's gaze stopped on Jian Fengqi for a moment. Jian Fengqi instantly felt that there was a dagger at his back, and he couldn't wait to run away. He had always been thick-skinned and rarely felt like this. He only felt that every minute and every second of staying here was very unbearable. He really didn't bring Chu Luiyue here on purpose. "I left West Hill for 2 years." Chu Luiyue said lightly. "In West Hill City, things have changed. I came here today to ask, when did the two of you become so close to each other?" Back then, because Jian Fengqi was too presumptuous and flamboyant, Muqingha had a lot of conflicts with him. Now, in the blink of an eye, the two of them seemed to have turned from enemies to friends. She really didn't believe that there was nothing going on here, asked Chu Luiwei with a smile as she sat down on a chair at the side. Muqingha, you go first. Digression, the fifth update is a little late, but it was released before 1 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 909. Muqingha was taken aback by the sudden shout, and he looked at the woman not far away. She was sitting there leisurely. Her clothes were very simple, but she still had a noble aura. She still had a smile on her youthful face, and her eyes were as bright as stars. She looked just like she did many years ago. However, she called him by his name in such a relaxed tone, as if the grudges of the past few years didn't exist at all. Muqingha slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves and lowered his eyes. It's just a normal meeting. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry. Muqingha only gave short answer. Then, he closed his mouth and didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. Jian Fengqi glanced at him as if he wanted to say something. He knitted his brows slightly, and hesitation flashed across his eyes. Even now, he still doesn't want to say anything. In fact, what Chu Luiwei asked was also what he wanted to ask. When the Imperial Ancestral Hall burned for a day and a night, even he was alarmed and rushed to the palace. In the end, Muqingha was even later than him. Even he could see that there was something wrong with the princess's death. However, Muqingha didn't express any objections from the beginning to the end. If it weren't for some things that happened later, Jian Fengqi would almost believe that he had completely betrayed Shang Wanyu. If he was on Jiang Yuqing's side in the past because he cared about the big picture, now that Jiang Yuqing and Shang Wan had been destroyed, what else could he say? Jian Fengqi really didn't understand. He wanted to help explain, but in fact, he didn't know much. Muqingha was the only one who knew the reason for many of the things he did. If others said anything, it would only complicate the situation. What do you think? Chu Luiwei didn't seem surprised by Muqingha's answer. He shrugged and looked at Jian Fengqi. Jian Fengqi's eyebrows twitched. It was just a small quarrel in the past. Come to think of it, there wasn't much conflict. Chu Luiwei smiled faintly, but his eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Jian Fengqi's words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. He could not help but look at Muqingha. Muqingha lowered her head. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, he raised his head again and calmly said, His Majesty sent out 3 requests for help that day, right? Chu Luiwei slowly sat up straight and stared at him. Muqingha put one hand behind her back and slowly clenched it, but her expression was calm. Those 3 messages were intercepted by me. It was me who cut off His Majesty's last chance of survival that day. It was already the middle of June, and the weather was a little hot. People came and went on the streets, and it was very lively. Rongxiu walked alone on the street. Because he wore a hood and restrained his aura, he didn't attract much attention. Most of the people around were still talking about her. Rongxiu walked forward and listened to the discussions of the people around him. Every time he heard those people's exclamations of surprise and admiration, his thin scarlet lips would curl slightly. She could always do what she wanted to do. It wasn't that he didn't want to come and help, but in the end, he still felt that it was better for her to give it her all. It was best for her to take back what she had lost. It was best for her to take revenge on her own. Only then could she completely wash away all the pain she had suffered. As for him, all he had to do was pass the knife to her whenever she needed it. Of course, the knife had to be fast enough. Just as he was thinking of this, he suddenly felt his surroundings darken. He raised his head to take a look and found that the sky that was previously clear and boundless was now suddenly filled with dark clouds and darkening. Soon, raindrops fell from his forehead. It was cold. He was walking in the direction of the 100 Herbs building, but he didn't expect that the weather would change halfway. The rain soon became heavier. The peddlers packed up and left one after another. White mist gradually appeared on the blue stone. There was only a curtain of rain between heaven and earth. Rongxiu frowned slightly, and there was a deep look in his eyes. Then, he turned around and walked in another direction. The tall figure of the man quickly disappeared in the rain, After Chu Luiyue walked out of the Mu Mansion alone, she walked aimlessly on the street. In her mind, she kept recalling what Mu Qing has said just now. He admitted it. He said that he did it. What else did he say? Oh, right. He said that he was originally Jiang Yuqing's man. So, his betrayal was actually not a betrayal. It turned out that the truth was like this. Countless scenes flashed before her eyes. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. The wind gradually rose, and the surrounding sky quickly darkened. She glanced up at him. It was stuffy, gloomy, and cold. She had already forgotten what kind of expression she had after hearing those words, and what kind of answer she gave. She didn't even know how she walked out of the Mu Mansion. Suddenly, she felt a furry touch. It was Dumpling squatting on her shoulder, gently rubbing her face. Chu Luiyue shook her head. Dumpling, don't worry. I'm fine. She probably left hope for herself, thinking, but in this world, there weren't so many thinking. Chu Luiyue looked at the sky, and there was rain dripping. In the blink of an eye, it sped up, connecting the sky and the earth into lines. Chu Luiyue moved and was about to go back, but she suddenly felt a cold aura rushing toward her from the distance in the rain. She suddenly looked up. Alarm bells rang in her heart. A bluish-purple ball of light broke through the air. It was heading straight for her face. She staggered her feet and was about to make a move when she suddenly felt someone approaching her from behind quickly and grabbing her waist. At the same time, a silver blade of light flew out. It collided with the ball of light. It was as if a transparent barrier had appeared around him, and all the fluctuations were blocked outside. An extremely familiar cold fragrance hit her, and Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly beat faster. She turned around and saw that the person who came had a noble appearance and an astonishing aura. It was Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao, why are you here? Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. Rong Xiao hugged her tighter, and his other hand held a black umbrella. His voice was low and lazy. It's raining. I'm here to hold the umbrella for you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9-10. Her heart, which had been empty, seemed to be filled with something in an instant. Chu Luiyue subconsciously hugged his lean waist tightly and pressed her face against his chest. Listening to his strong heartbeat, it seemed to make the almost frozen blood in her body flow again. The heavy rain fell, and the cold wind blew everywhere. Countless ripples on the ground intertwined. Under the dark sky, only the two of them, who were tightly leaning against each other, could be seen. With a burst of eardrums, Chu Luiyue felt that her drifting thoughts were finally pulled back. Her numb limbs gradually regained their warmth, and the countless illusions in front of her disappeared little by little. Only Rong Xiao was left. Hugging and leaning on each other, it was so real. The black umbrella above her head stood up, as if it was blocking out all the wind and rain. His broad and warm embrace made her yearn for it. Chu Luiyue was in a daze. After a while, she said in a low voice, Rong Xiao, I miss you so much. Rong Xiao frowned slightly. There was something wrong with her voice. She had always been smart, independent, and strong. No matter what kind of situation she encountered, she never seemed to panic. Even after experiencing such a betrayal, she still relied on her own strength to return all the pain she had suffered and take back everything that belonged to her. She seemed to be invincible, but in this world, how could any flesh and blood not know pain and suffering? It was just that someone was better at hiding it. He leaned closer, and his jade-like chin gently rested on her head. I'm here, don't be afraid. It was a simple sentence, but it was his most cherished promise. Chu Luiyue's eyes suddenly became hot. Even if she was homeless and miserable, even if she was full of twists and turns, there would always be one person in this world who would appear and accompany her when she needed him most. He gave her courage and love. That was enough. She closed her eyes, dispersing the last bit of disappointment and regret in her heart. Anyway, it was not like she had not experienced a deeper blow. Now this was nothing. At the very least, the current situation was still under her control. Bang! The sound of something exploding came from behind. Chu Luiyue looked up from Rong Xiao's arms and glanced back. she saw that the purplish-blue ball of light that was flying towards her had completely dissipated after colliding with Rongxiu's power. At this moment, there was only something left that fell into the water. Pitter-patter, splashing a few drops of rainwater. Chu Luiyue looked over and vaguely saw that it was a thumb-sized object. It was glowing faintly in the water, but he couldn't see it clearly. "What's that?" Chu Luiyue asked curiously. Just now, she had clearly sensed that this thing was coming for her. The aura he felt at that moment was very unfamiliar. She thought for a moment, but she couldn't figure out who would do such a thing. "It's just a small toy," Rongxiu said lightly. Chu Luiyue didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Rongxiu seemed to have recognized the origin of that thing, and there was a hint of coldness in his tone. Chu Luiyue gave Dumpling a look. Dumpling flew out and picked up the thing. Rongxiu glanced at Dumpling, his eyes cold. Dumpling shuddered. Its strong desire to live made its wings tremble slightly, and it almost threw the thing out. Withstanding the huge pressure, it finally handed the thing to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand and was about to receive it when Rongxiu, who was beside her, grabbed her hand. At the same time, a force flew out and hit the item. Bang! With a crisp sound, the thing cracked open. Then a piece of paper flew out and unfolded automatically. It seemed to be a piece of white rice paper that was casually cut, but it floated in mid-air and didn't get stained by the raindrops at all. It was as if there was an invisible barrier around it. There were only 2 lines of words on that piece of paper. The first line was, "Shangguan Yu, congratulations." The second line was, "Your father is doing very well at Ai's place. Don't miss him. We will meet again in a month's time." Just as Chu Luiyue finished reading, that piece of paper quickly combusted and turned into ashes, disappearing without a trace. Other than the faint smell of burning that filled the air, it was as if nothing had happened. But Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes wide, and her heart was filled with shock, because she had seen the handwriting on that piece of paper before. Back then, she had received a letter from Heaven's Canopy, and that letter had half a Xian formation as a seal. She had drawn the remaining half of the Xian formation before opening the letter, and that letter had written, "Shangguan Yu, long time no see." At that time, she hadn't told anyone about her identity, so after receiving that letter, she had thought about it for a long time, but she couldn't figure out who wrote the letter. After coming to Xiling, she had been busy with various things and had forgotten about this matter for a while. Until today, when she saw that piece of paper again. It must have been written by the same person, and the other party had obviously known about her identity a long time ago. It was even possible that the other party knew everything about her like the back of their hand. Needless to say, this congratulations was referring to her ascension to the throne, and her father was also deliberately taken away by the other party. Chu Luiyue frowned. This person, who exactly was it? At first, she thought that it was someone from the Tianling dynasty, but now it seemed that it wasn't the case. To be able to call himself I and have such means, it was very likely that he came from outside the Tianling dynasty. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flashed across the corner of his eyes. She was really haunting him. Chu Luiyue suddenly turned her head and looked at Rongxiu. "You know who this is?" She had an inexplicable intuition that Rongxiu seemed to know more than she expected. She didn't know where this feeling came from, but judging from Rongxiu's reaction just now, it seemed that her guess was right. Rongxiu's thin red lips moved slightly. Just as he was about to speak, a shout came from the corner of the street behind them. "Your Highness!" It was 13's voice. Chu Luiyue turned around and saw a slender young man running toward them quickly. His movements were nimble and free. It seemed that he didn't move much, but he was already in front of them. 13 came in the rain, but he was surrounded by a layer of enchantment, so he wasn't worried about getting wet. Because he was still young, Chu Luiyue almost never assigned tasks to 13. She only let him focus on cultivation. This also allowed 13 to come and go freely both inside and outside the palace. Today, he happened to meet Shangguan Yu. When he heard that it was related to his master, he immediately agreed and left the palace to look for him. When he was still a short distance away from Chu Luiyue, 13 shouted excitedly. Your Highness, the retired emperor was worried that you would be out alone for too long, so he asked me to send you an umbrella and take you back to the palace. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:11. Suddenly, 13's voice stopped abruptly, and he stopped in his tracks. He looked at the scene in front of him in shock. Someone was holding an umbrella for Her Highness. More importantly, he was hugging Her Highness. With such an intimate gesture, anyone could tell that the relationship between the two was not ordinary. You, who are you? 13 had come happily to bring Chu Luiyue back to the palace, but when he saw this scene, he felt uncomfortable. Without waiting for Chu Luiyue to speak, Rongxiu raised his eyebrows and said calmly, I'm Yuer's fiancé. 13's eyes widened in shock, and his mouth dropped open. You're Her Highness's fiancé. Didn't Her Highness just settle Jiang Yuqing and Shang Wanwan? How did she suddenly have a fiancé? Because 13 was young, no one told him about this, so he was especially shocked at first glance. Chu Luiyue was thinking, what did 13 say just now? He seemed to have mentioned the retired emperor. Based on Rongxiu's intelligence, he would have sensed something wrong with this sentence and guessed her identity. You said just now, who asked you to bring Yuer back? Sure enough, Rongxiu spoke casually and directly. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. 13 was about to reply, but he saw that there was something wrong with Her Highness's eyes, so he covered his mouth. Rongxiu, I have something to tell you. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to find a suitable time to tell him everything, but she didn't expect that the moment the two of them met, she had no choice but to say it now. Rongxiu looked down at her. There was a trace of embarrassment on his face, but there was an undetectable trace of a smile at the corner of his lips. Was she embarrassed that she had not been honest with him about those things before? Rongxiu's voice was low. This low rhetorical question seemed to come from his chest, pressing tightly against his heart and brushing past his eardrums. It was pleasing to the ear and numbing. Chu Luiyue blushed slightly, but she held his hand gently and firmly, their fingers intertwined. Come with me. 6 Cloud Street, Chu Estate. The rain had just stopped, and in the quiet and leisurely courtyard, there was already a shallow accumulation of rainwater. Water droplets continuously dripped from the eaves and fell into it, creating a circle of ripples. The air after the rain was moist and sweet. 13 stood outside the door, waiting anxiously and impatiently. From time to time, he would glance at the tightly shut door. Her Highness, and that man had been in there for a long time and still hadn't come out. From His Highness's words, it seemed that he wanted to explain something to that man. However, His Highness was of noble birth and was decisive in killing. Since when did he need to explain so much to others? And, most importantly, that man was actually Her Highness' fiancé. 13 scratched his head. 7th brother, and the others didn't mention it before. He grew up in Shilling City and was very sure that the man was definitely not from Shilling City. However, judging from the aura around him, he shouldn't be underestimated. 13 looked inside again and scratched his head. This is what I wanted to tell you. In the room, Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu sat facing each other. Chu Luiyue told him everything about her past life and current life. I am Chu Luiyue from the Empire of Yaochun, and also from the Shanghai Yu of the Tianling dynasty. She looked at Rongxiu and said word by word seriously. Previously, I only said that there was an enemy of mine in Shilling City, but I didn't tell you everything clearly because, at that time, I wasn't sure if I could successfully complete what I wanted to do. But now, everything has been settled. I originally wanted to find an opportunity to tell you, but I didn't expect it to happen today. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. Rongxiu, this is the real me. After saying that, Chu Luiyue fell silent and waited quietly for Rongxiu's reaction. However, unexpectedly, Rongxiu's face didn't show any shock or surprise. Instead, there was a hint of tenderness in his eyes. He reached out and held her hand tightly. His fingers gently rubbed the back of her hand a few times. Does it hurt? Chu Luiyue was stunned. What? Whether it was that day, when you rejected me, or everything that happened after that. You must have suffered a lot, right? Rongshio looked at her, his eyes deep. He was waiting for her to tell him everything personally, but to her, it was undoubtedly exposing her own scars. Knowing that she had suffered a lot was also a kind of torture for him. Chu Luiyue was stunned, but her eyes suddenly became hot. Rongshio, you are not angry that I lied to you? Although she didn't mean to deceive him. She had hidden too many things after all. Rongshio actually didn't care at all? Hearing that, Rongshio shook his head gently, smiled slightly, and sighed softly. I don't even have enough time to feel sorry for you. How can I have the energy to be angry? Chu Liwei didn't expect Rongshio to have such a reaction. In the next moment, Rongshio leaned closer and sucked a teardrop from the corner of her eye. Promise me that in the future, don't shoulder anything by yourself. I'll always be there. The previous uneasiness and guilt all disappeared at this moment, and all of it turned into grievances and poured out in torrents. Suddenly, as if the heavy armor had been removed, her whole body relaxed. The suffering and torture that she had experienced in the past seemed to be not worth mentioning now. The heavens gave her pain and disaster, but they also gave her Rongshio. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and buried her head in his shoulder, her voice muffled. Okay. After a while, there was a knock on the door outside. 13's somewhat nervous voice sounded. Your Highness? The rain has stopped for a long time. Should we go back to the palace? In fact, he didn't want to rush at this time, but there were still people waiting in the palace. Chu Yue's emotions gradually calmed down, and she pulled herself out of Rongshio's arms. She almost forgot that 13 was still waiting outside. I wanted to talk to you about something, but it seems that I can't today. Rongshio tidied her messy hair and gently rubbed her face. Chu Liwei looked at him, and a white light suddenly flashed in her mind. She vaguely felt that Rongshio seemed to want to talk to her about something important, and it was very likely that it was because of his previous identity as the Son of God. But 13 was already rushing her, and it was indeed not convenient for her to stay for too long. Chu Luiyue could only nod. Then you can stay here for the night. Tomorrow, she paused, raised her eyes slightly, and glanced at Rongshio again. Actually, Father mentioned to me before that. He said that he wanted to see you. Rongshio understood and kissed her gently between her eyebrows. Then I'll visit father-in-law tomorrow. Chu Yue's face turned red, and then she was a little worried. Won't tomorrow be too soon? There should be some time to prepare for this kind of thing. Rongshio narrowed his eyes, and a smile flashed across his eyes. His wife didn't seem to have much confidence in her man. Then in 3 days. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:12. After saying goodbye to Rongshio, Chu Luiyue returned to the palace with Shursan. She was disappointed and worried, but after seeing Rongshio, she inexplicably felt relieved. It seemed that with him, there was nothing to worry about. When she returned to Xiaoyu Hall, Shang Wenyu had been waiting there for a long time. Seeing Chu Luiyue return safely, Shang Wenyu breathed a sigh of relief. Ever since the incident 2 years ago, he had become much more sensitive. Chu Luiyue had been away for too long, and he would be worried. Although he knew that she had a lot of trump cards now, it was normal for her parents to be worried. Chu Luiyue thought about it, and only told Shang Wenyu that Rongshio would come in 3 days. As for Chuning being held hostage, she did not mention much. Now she did not even know who the other party was, and telling her father would only make him more worried. However, Shang Wenyu became more and more curious about Rongshio. He wondered what kind of person could be so favored by her. Looking at Chu Yue's sparkling eyes when she mentioned Rongshio, Shang Wenyu secretly made up his mind. As long as the boy was a good person, he would not object. Everything was for the sake of his daughter's happiness. After sending Shang Wenyu away, Chu Luiyue returned to the study and sat down on a chair. She had experienced too many things today, which made her a little confused. Countless intertwined images flashed through her mind. After a long while, she opened her eyes. Her eyes were calm and serene. Taizu, Chu Luiyue respectfully called out. A translucent phantom appeared in front of her. It was Taizu. "Girl, what's bothering you?" Taizu asked with one hand behind his back. Chu Lua nodded. "The black demon cave you mentioned before. What kind of existence is it?" Hearing this, Taizu looked solemn and was silent for a while. Chu Lua waited quietly. She had some understanding of the various dynasties in Heaven's Canopy. Some of them were stronger than the Tianling dynasty, while some were weaker. However, she had never heard of the Black Demon Cave. "That's a hidden sect." Chu Lua frowned slightly. "Hidden sects?" After a long while, Taizu spoke slowly. He let out a long sigh, as if he was recalling something. "1,000 years ago, I was already at the peak of the 9th stage, just one step away from stepping into the deity realm. But even after 10 years, I still haven't succeeded. After that, I left Tianling and traveled the continent. Encountering the Black Demon Cave was actually a pure accident. The experts of the Black Demon Cave are as numerous as the clouds. Even when I was at my peak, I still couldn't be compared to them. I've seen the Black Demon Cave's people move mountains and fill seas. They're truly great experts. Even after 1,000 years, the things that happened back then were still deeply engraved in his mind, as fresh as yesterday." Chu Luiwei was also shocked. Taizu was the strongest expert of the Tianling dynasty in 1,000 years. If even he said so, then just how strong were the people of the Black Demon Cave? That day, although that person didn't have a physical body and was only left with a soul, the aura of the Black Demon Cave was extremely strong. That's why I recognized it at a glance. These hidden sects were very strong in cultivation, and most of them had their own distinctive characteristics. As long as you've seen them, you'll be able to recognize them at a glance. But these people are usually very arrogant and rarely enter the world, let alone participate in the disputes between dynasties. Taizu shook his head, looking puzzled. "I don't know what's going on this time." Chu Lua pondered for a moment. "That soul has been in Shangguan Wan's body for a long time, at least a few years. According to what Shangguan Wan said, she herself doesn't know when that person came into existence. But many of the things she did later were because she was bewitched by that person, including the matter of killing me." Taizu looked at her with a complicated gaze. "Actually, that day, I've already sensed that that person seems to be targeting you. Do you know why?" Chu Yue's heart skipped a beat. She still remembered clearly what that person had said at that time. It seemed to be because of the water droplet in her body. Ever since this water droplet transformed into an existence similar to the pill of origin in her body, it had been in this form almost all the time. But that day, under the influence of that man, it transformed into the appearance of a transparent book page again, and faintly felt like it was struggling to be pulled out. But if that person came for this, then why did he target her so early on? Before she died in her previous life, she didn't have this thing on her. It was only after she had been reborn that such an item suddenly appeared in her body out of nowhere. Even now, she still didn't know what it was. She shook her head. That person's attack failed, but he definitely won't give up. He'll come again in the future. Taizu said in a low voice. It's fine if he's alone, but if he implicates others, this was actually what he was most worried about. If the people of Black Demon Cave wanted to attack Tianling, even he might not be able to defeat them. Girl, the most important thing for you now is to improve your cultivation as soon as possible. This way, even if someone wants to trouble you in the future, you'll have the power to deal with it. Taizu frowned. You have too many treasures on you, and any one of them will attract the covetous eyes of countless people. You can hide it for a while, but you can't hide it forever. The only way, and also the best way, was to become stronger by himself. Chu Lua nodded seriously. You will remember Taizu's teachings. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Chu Lua got up and packed up, then went to the Yuana Palace. The Yuana Palace was Shangguan Yu's bedchamber. It was obvious that Shangguan Yu wanted to meet Rongxiu as Rongxiu's father by setting the venue here instead of the palace hall where the other officials would attend court. Although Shangguan Yu was now the emperor, in Shangguan Yu's eyes, whether this marriage could make her happy was the most important thing. Perhaps in the eyes of the world, An emperor's marriage was a matter of state first, followed by family affairs. But in Shangguan Yu's eyes, it was a matter of family first, followed by state affairs. Everywhere she passed, the palace servants bowed respectfully. But just as she walked out of the Yuanhe palace, she saw someone standing there, as if waiting for someone. Hearing the movement, the person turned around. When he saw Chu Liuyue's face, a trace of excitement and joy appeared on the handsome young man's face. He took 2 quick steps forward. Your Majesty." Chu Liyue looked at him strangely. "Zhao Zicheng, why are you here?" This was the second son of the Zhao family, also a famous family in Shilling City. But he had left Shilling a few years ago, and she didn't expect him to come back today. Hearing her question, Zhao Zicheng's ears turned red. "When I heard that your Majesty had returned, I rushed back day and night, hoping to see your Majesty." He seemed to be very nervous, but his face was full of hope and sincerity. "Your Majesty, I'm here today to confess my feelings to you. Previously, because you chose Jiang Yuqing, I didn't say much and left Shilling. But this time, please give Zicheng a chance." The corner of Chu Liyue's eyes twitched. Is he confessing? On the day when I'm going to meet father with my fiancée? Digression, I suddenly found out that a friend of mine had a tumor, so I chatted with him for a long time. Everyone, take care of your health and have regular checkups. Sigh, I'll continue at 6. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:13. Zhao Zicheng didn't seem to notice anything wrong with Chu Liyue's expression and continued speaking. "Because I know that your Majesty has been busy recently, Zicheng has been staying in the residence these few days and didn't dare to disturb you." But Zhao Zicheng looked up and quickly glanced at the woman in front of him. His eyes were filled with unconcealable adoration, and his nervous heart was beating wildly. But Zicheng has admired your Majesty for many years. I'm afraid that if I don't say it this time, I won't have another chance in the future." Zhao Zicheng instantly felt much better after finally speaking his mind. However, his handsome face was stained with a tinge of red. His eyes were filled with hope and uneasiness as he looked at Chu Liyue, as if he was waiting for her answer. Chu Liyue sighed inwardly. To be honest, Zhao Zicheng was very good. Although the Zhao family wasn't considered the top family in Shilling City, they were still officials of the Tianling dynasty for hundreds of years and had a deep foundation. As the second son of the Zhao family's direct descendant, Zhao Zicheng's status was even more precious. Most importantly, he was an extremely outstanding mystic master genius. In the entire Shilling, except for Chu Liyue, almost no one could be compared to him. If Jian Fengqi was a genius who was only one step behind her in alchemy, then Zhao Zicheng was above mystic master level and could fight with her. When she was young, she cultivated with many elders of the Imperial family. Jian Fengqi and Zhao Zicheng had been her study companions for a period of time. Unlike Jian Fengqi's arrogant and unbridled personality, Zhao Zicheng was more like a modest gentleman with an introverted and gentle personality. For so many years, everyone in Shilling City praised the second son of the Zhao family when they mentioned him. Even compared to Jiang Yuqing, he was definitely on par in all aspects. "Zhao Zicheng, I remember that you are already 27 this year," Chu Liyue said. Zhao Zicheng was stunned for a moment and nodded in confusion. "That's right. At this age, you should have married and had children long ago," Chu Liyue said sincerely and calmly. "You don't have to waste any more time on me." Zhao Zicheng's originally slightly red face turned white with a swish. A hint of panic flashed in his eyes. "Your Majesty, what do you mean?" Chu Liyue shook his head. "As smart as you are, there's no way you don't know what I mean. If that's the case, don't mention it again in the future. Please leave." With that, Chu Liyue prepared to leave. Zhao Zicheng only hesitated for a moment before he immediately blocked her way again. "Your Majesty, Zicheng is sincerely seeking your hand in marriage." Zhao Zicheng tried hard to suppress the nervousness and embarrassment in his heart. "Back then, because Jiang Yuqing beat me to it and you agreed to the engagement with him, I put away my thoughts and left the West Hill alone. Although it's uncomfortable, as long as you're happy, everything else doesn't matter. But now, he has betrayed you, and I am filled with regret. Missing it once is already a matter of life and death. I don't want the same thing to happen a second time. Zhao Zicheng was determined to come today. A few years ago, he left heartbroken, thinking that he had helped her, but he didn't expect that in the end, everything would be so absurd. When he heard that she had survived a great disaster and returned from tribulation, he immediately rushed back. No matter what, he would definitely persevere to the end this time. Although he himself didn't care much about worldly possessions, in terms of background, talent, and so on, he was confident that he was definitely one of the most suitable choices for her now. Chu Luiyue felt a headache coming on. Zhao Zicheng had a cool and gentle personality, but when this kind of person was stubborn, even a few oxen couldn't pull him back. Zhao Zicheng, I have always understood your feelings. Chu Luiyue thought about it, but still decided to tell him the truth. Since many years ago, even if you don't say it, I understand. Zhao Zicheng was actually a very honest person and didn't know how to hide his feelings. She wasn't stupid. They had spent a few years studying together, and later he entered the Imperial court as an official. From time to time, they would see each other in the Imperial court or at palace banquets. How could she not know his feelings? It was just that things like feelings could never be forced. Zhao Zicheng was stunned for a moment, and it took him a while to realize what she meant. Looking at the clear eyes of the woman in front of him, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. Although her appearance was slightly different from before, her eyebrows and eyes were still the familiar appearance in his memory. She was still her. These words were a clear rejection. But he didn't want to give up just like that. Can't you give me a chance? Zhao Zicheng spoke with difficulty, as if something in his eyes would shatter at the slightest touch. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of forgetting and letting go of this person after so many years of thinking. If he could do it, he wouldn't be standing here today. Just one time, and no. A low and cold man's voice suddenly came from behind. Although the tone was light, there was a faint, sharp pressure in the words. Zhao Zicheng turned around and saw a man in white. He didn't know when, but he had appeared not far behind him. The man looked to be in his early 20s. He was tall and wore a white robe. The breeze blew the corner of his robe, making him look like a banished immortal. But what was even more shocking was his appearance. His facial features were as if they were carefully carved and cast by the heavens. Chapter 9:14. It was a simple sentence, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder. It smashed into Zhao Zicheng's heart. His mind went blank for a moment. What did you say? He was her fiancé. Didn't she just come back? When he looked back in shock, only to see the woman who had been distant and cold to him just now unconsciously smile after seeing the person who came. Thousands of stars seemed to shine in her eyes. At this moment, Zhao Zicheng's heart turned cold. Rong Xiao. Chu Luiyue didn't expect him to come so quickly and walked over. Why are you here so early? Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. Since I want to meet my father-in-law, I naturally have to be early. Besides, if I came late, wouldn't I miss a good show? Chu Luiyue glared at him. How could he joke with her at this time? She had clearly rejected him just now. Rong Xiao looked at her angry and coquettish expression and smiled slightly. His heart itched slightly, and he wanted to hug her directly. But when he thought that this was the Tianling Palace, and there were many palace servants around to serve them, he suppressed the urge and just held her hand. Seeing the two of them clasp hands, Zhao Zicheng finally reacted. He frowned subconsciously. Anyone could see that the two of them were very close. Fiancé. Why hadn't he heard of it before? Zhao Zicheng had specially asked his father a few days ago to sound out Shang Wanyu, but he didn't mention it at that time. Could it be someone she met in the past 2 years? If he remembered correctly, she had returned from an empire called Yao Chun outside Heaven's Canopy. This man, you don't seem to be from West Hill. Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath and tried to make himself look calm. Not to mention West Hill, even in the entire Tianling, there was no Rong family among the famous families. There was a high probability that it was from Yao Chun. Chu Liwei didn't want to say too much to Zhao Zicheng, so she said, "Father should be waiting for me. Father should be waiting inside, so I'll go in with Rongxiu first. Second young master Zhao, you should go back too." Zhao Zicheng looked at Rongxiu insistently. "Since you're Her Majesty's fiancé, there's nothing you can't say about your family background, right?" He was going to go against Rongxiu. Rongxiu looked at Chu Liwei comfortingly and smiled. "I'm 7th Prince Yao Chun, Rongxiu." He was indeed from of Yao Chen's people. Of course. Of the ROF of course. Of the Tianling, of the Tianling, of the Emperor of the Emperors of the difference in status between the two of them was too great. Not to mention him, even the officials of the Imperial court wouldn't agree to this marriage. Zhao Zicheng couldn't help but look at Chu Liwei. Of course she knew this, but she was still so insistent. It was enough to prove that she was truly moved by this man. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists tightly, feeling extremely conflicted. In the early years, it was Jiang Yuqing who was one step ahead. Now, there was Rongxiu. It seemed that he was always a little short of success every time. He really couldn't take it lying down. "I am the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Zhao Zicheng." Although Zhao Zicheng hadn't stayed in West Hill for the past few years, he hadn't resigned from his position. His journey had been smooth, and he had already become an assistant minister at such a young age. But in fact, this title was not worth mentioning compared to his aristocratic background. There were several assistant ministers of the Ministry of Rights, but there was only one second young master of the Zhao family. Zhao Zicheng had no intention of using his background to suppress others. He only wanted to use his official position to try and pressure the other party. When ordinary people heard this, it was inevitable that they would be surprised and in admiration. But after he finished speaking, the man opposite him only nodded with an indifferent expression, as if he didn't care. "Second young master Zhao, I've heard of you." Chu Liwei and Zhao Zicheng both looked at him in surprise. Chu Liwei thought that Rongxiu had only been to West Hill once before, and Zhao Zicheng wasn't here at that time. How could he have heard of Zhao Zicheng's name? Zhao Zicheng thought to himself, "Judging from this Rongxiu's tone, he seems to know something about me. But why doesn't he care at all? Perhaps he doesn't know much about the situation in West Hill. If that's the case, it would explain his series of reactions." Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath. "I have a few words that I would like to talk to young Master Rong alone. Is it convenient for you?" Rongxiu raised his eyebrows and nodded. "Why not?" Seeing that the atmosphere was getting strange, Chu Liwei grabbed Rongxiu. "If you have something to say it here. It's most likely related to me. Why can't I listen?" Zhao Zicheng looked at her hesitantly. "Your Majesty, Rongxiu and I are engaged. What can I not listen to?" "Second young master Zhao, if you have something to say, please speak your mind." Rongxiu blinked, and a faint smile flashed across his eyes. "Well, it's rare to see her supporting me like this. It feels good?" Zhao Zicheng's eyes dimmed for a moment. Even Jiang Yuqing back then, she didn't seem to have spoken up for me like this. She's protecting me like this. It's obvious that she's really in love. On the other hand, Rongxiu was standing behind her, as if he was enjoying this woman's protection of him with a clear conscience. Zhao Zicheng suddenly became angry. If it's already like this, won't it be worse in the future? This marriage is not worth it to me. Zhao Zicheng's expression became much more serious. "Since Your Majesty has said so, I will not mince my words. Young Master Rong, if you are sincere to Her Majesty, then please leave her now and don't have anything to do with her anymore." As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere suddenly turned cold. The space around them seemed to freeze inch by inch. Chu Liwei could clearly feel an extremely cold aura spreading from Rongxiu's body. For a moment, Zhao Zicheng felt an extremely dangerous, killing intent. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. His hair stood on end. But in the blink of an eye, this feeling quickly disappeared without a trace. It was as if everything was just an illusion. Rongxiu smiled, but his voice was so cold that it made one's heart tremble. "Oh, what if I say no?" Zhao Zicheng knew that he would definitely not agree after hearing this, so he wasn't discouraged and continued speaking. Perhaps you two were very close in the past, but now, as you can see, she is already the Tianling Emperor. She needs to marry someone of the same status, but you don't have this right. If you really like her and cherish her, then for her own good, you should cancel this marriage and leave. Don't tell me you don't know what self-awareness is. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:15. Chu Yuyue's expression turned cold. Zhao Zicheng. Rong Xiu held her hand and gave her a reassuring glance. Then he chuckled, as if he didn't care about Zhao Zicheng's words and didn't show any anger at being provoked. If I can prove that I'm worthy of you, second young Master Zhao will take back your words and promise not to disturb you in the future. How about it? Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Rong Xiu to not only not be angry, but also take the initiative to say such a thing. He couldn't help but frown and ask in return, "Prove? What proof do you have?" Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent. He stood there, as ethereal and cold as a landscape painting, exuding an indescribable charm. "Whatever you can think of, just do it." His voice was light and nonchalant, as if he didn't take this matter to heart at all. This was the kind of confidence that could only come from a person with great strength. Zhao Zicheng's first reaction was that it was absurd. This Rong Xiu truly didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He even dared to say such a thing. Did he know what kind of existence the Tianling dynasty was? Any one of the people here might be able to easily crush him. This made Zhao Zicheng even more dissatisfied and indignant. Such an arrogant and domineering man didn't deserve to be with her. Even if she didn't like him, Zhao Zicheng, and chose other outstanding young talents, he had nothing to say. But this Rong Xiu couldn't do it. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists and said, "All right, since you dare to face it head on, this young master won't deliberately make things difficult for you. One's background can't be chosen, so there's no need to compare. As long as you can prove that you're outstanding enough. May I ask, young Master Rong, what kind of cultivation do you practice? Martial artist, mystic master, or celestial physician?" Rong Xiu raised his brows slightly. "May I know which one second young Master Zhao is best at?" Zhao Zicheng froze for a moment, then straightened his body and said with a slightly solemn expression, "Mystic Master." He actually dabbled in the other two fields, but comparatively speaking, his talent as a mystic master was the best. His cultivation as a mystic master was also the highest. "Then I'll be a mystic cultivator," Rong Xiu said indifferently. There was a moment of silence. After a moment, Zhao Zicheng opened his eyes slightly and asked in surprise and shock, "Mystic cultivator? Are you sure?" He had already said that he was best at being a Xian master, but Rong Xiu just had to choose this. "I'm sure." Of course, if second young Master Zhao wanted to compete in other aspects, Rong Xiu would naturally accompany him to the end. Rong Xiu's expression was calm, and there was a hint of a smile on his lips. He seemed to be very patient. His reaction completely provoked Zhao Zicheng. "Good. That was a Xian master. If you can defeat me, from now on, I will never get involved in these matters again. Also, from now on, stay away from you, Rong Xiu reminded. Zhao Zicheng choked. "All right." Hearing the answer, Rong Xiu nodded with satisfaction. Chu Luiyue glanced at Rong Xiu. "This is on purpose? Why do I feel that Rong Xiu deliberately induced Zhao Zicheng to say these words?" Zhao Zicheng composed himself. "In that case, let's make an appointment. Let's do it today." Before he finished speaking, a low and powerful voice came from not far away. They looked back and saw that Shang Wanyu had already walked out of Yuan Hall. The words just now came from his mouth. "Father," Chu Luiyue shouted. Rong Xiu cupped his fists and bowed to Shang Wanyu. "Rong Xiu greets your majesty." Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Shang Wanyu to appear at this time. Thinking that he seemed to have heard everything just now, he was a little nervous and also bowed. Shock flashed across Shang Wanyu's eyes as he sized Rong Xiu up, but there was also a tinge of admiration. He waited in Yuan Hall for a long time, but no one came. Later, He heard from the palace servants that a few people were quarreling outside, so he planned to come out and take a look. At first glance, he saw his baby Yu-er. Then, he turned his gaze and saw another man in white standing beside her. Seeing that the two were standing very close to each other, he had already guessed the identity of this person. Although he only saw the back of Rongxiu just now, Shangwan Yu could still vaguely sense the noble and imposing aura of Rongxiu. He was a little surprised. Even the ordinary children of the aristocratic families couldn't compare to such an imposing manner. He had been sitting on the throne for a long time, so he had an excellent eye for people. Rongxiu exuded a noble aura that only a person of high status would have. He had seen Emperor Yao Chen a few times, but he couldn't be compared to this person. He didn't seem like someone who could be raised by an existence like Emperor Yao Chen. So, Rongxiu, standing close to him and sizing him up, Shangwan Yu finally saw Rongxiu's face clearly. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Isn't he too good-looking? Even he had to admit that he'd never seen such a peerlessly noble appearance that was like an immortal's in his life. Even Jiang Yuqing, who was famous for being the most handsome man in Xiling, paled in comparison to her instantly. In comparison, it was like a firefly competing with the sun and the moon. The contrast was simply tragic. With just one look, Shangwan Yu immediately understood why his daughter liked him. With such a face, he was probably a young girl who was in love. Her heart would be moved at the sight of him. If he hadn't eavesdropped for a while, just now, and felt that this man was quite responsible and courageous, Shangwan Yu almost suspected that his baby daughter was simply bewitched by this devilish face. Father, Rongxiu and I were going to visit you, but we didn't expect to meet second young Master Zhao. We were delayed for a while. You won't be angry, right? Chu Luiyue blinked. Shangwan Yu laughed. He knew that she was speaking up for Rongxiu, but he felt inexplicably unhappy when he saw how protective she was of Rongxiu. Do you think your father is such a petty person? Zhao Ziqing's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. So they had made an appointment long ago? Then wouldn't he? Thinking of this, Zhao Ziqing suddenly felt even more nervous. Shangwan Yu looked at Zhao Ziqing and sighed at his heart. Although Zhao Ziqing was outstanding in all aspects, what could he do if you didn't like him? Back then, Zhao Ziqing left West Hill sadly because of the engagement between Yu and Jiang Yuqing. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't know. Now that Jiang Yuqing was defeated and imprisoned, Zhao Ziqing still had feelings for Yu and specially came to ask for her hand in marriage. There was nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. Since you have made an appointment, there's no time like the present. Let's do it today. He also wanted to see how powerful Rongxiu was. Yu had praised him before, but he still didn't quite believe it. Only when he saw it with his own eyes could he be sure. Coincidentally, there's a martial arts field behind Yuan Hall. Let's do it there. Since Shangwan Yu had said so, the rest of the people naturally wouldn't object. Everyone began to walk into Yuan Hall. Chu Luiyue pulled Rongxiu's sleeve and whispered, Rongxiu, when did you cultivate as a Xian master? Zhao Ziqing is very talented in this aspect. Can you do it? Mobile users, please browse for a more high-quality reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:16. When Rongxiu heard this, his footsteps paused slightly. He glanced at her and raised his eyebrows slightly. A faint light flashed across his deep phoenix eyes. For some reason, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. It was extremely dangerous. He didn't open his mouth, but a voice as weak as a fly clearly entered her ears. Don't say such things in the future. Chu Luiyue blinked and vaguely felt that she had committed a huge taboo. What did I just say? Put your heart back in your stomach. Rongxiu gave his wife a warning look. Your man is very good at everything. Chu Luiyue's face heated up slightly, and her ears burned a little. She immediately looked away and followed the crowd forward. TSK, wasn't she also worried about him? After all, they had known each other for so long, but she still didn't know that Rongxiu was actually a mystic cultivator. Although she knew that Rongxiu was very strong in the past, She had always thought that he was only a martial artist. Now that she was going to compete with Zhao Zicheng as a mystic cultivator, she really didn't have any confidence. Zhao Zicheng's talent in this aspect was only slightly weaker than hers. After so many years of diligent cultivation, it wasn't hard to imagine how powerful his cultivation had become as a mystic cultivator. Rong Xiu was actually so calm. However, a certain someone who had been warned by Yin Zheng naturally didn't dare to ask any more questions. Since he had such a reaction, he should have some confidence. Seeing Rong Xiu's calm and confident appearance, as if he didn't take this matter seriously, Chu Luiyue, who was originally a little worried, gradually relaxed. This man seemed to have never needed her to worry about. Yuan Hall, martial arts training field in the backyard. Rong Xiu and Zhao Zicheng stood facing each other. Shang Guanyu and Chu Luiyue sat below the field. Around them stood the black cavalry who were in charge of guarding. It was quiet all around. Everyone's gaze was focused on the two people on the field. Some were curious, while others were doubtful. Now, everyone here already knew that the man in white, Rong Xiu, was Her Majesty's fiancé. Since Zhao Zicheng failed to marry Her Majesty, the two of them decided to compete. Since this matter involved Chu Luiyue, it would naturally cause a huge commotion. At this moment, although everyone looked very calm on the surface, their hearts were already surging with waves. Outside the palace gates in the distance, some palace servants were huddled together, cautiously looking in this direction. I heard that the man in white was Her Majesty's fiancé in country Yao Chun. I think he's the 7th prince of country Yao Chun. Yao Chun? Isn't that a vassal state of Tianling? Even though he is a prince, his status doesn't match His Majesty's. But such a graceful appearance is truly rare in the world. Previously, I thought that second young master Zhao was quite good. However, I don't know why, but when I compare the two of them, I actually feel that second young master Zhao is slightly inferior. These are all external things, they're not that important. Her Majesty's status is noble. Even if she agrees, I'm afraid the courtiers won't nod their heads easily. When second young master Zhao left Xiling, he was already a level 7 mystic master. After a few years, I wonder how much he has improved. I'm afraid this duel is going to be difficult. Zhao Zicheng looked at Rong Xiu opposite him and cupped his fists. Please, Rong Xiu nodded indifferently. Seeing how calm he was, Zhao Zicheng frowned. I'll let him be arrogant for a while longer. When we really fight, he'll know what it means to say that there's always someone better than you. There are some people that a mere 7th prince of Yao Chun can't obtain. Zhao Zicheng held his breath and focused. He slightly staggered his feet and raised his hand. A silver force as thick as a thumb instantly flew out from his palm. That force was extremely pure. It danced lightly in the wind, but contained a powerful pressure. Then, Zhao Zicheng waved his hands. That force actually split into hundreds of forces in an instant. Moreover, each of them was the same thickness as the first one. The aura of each force was completely the same. To be able to gather these forces together and quickly split them up again, it was enough to prove that Zhao Zicheng's control of the force was already at the peak of perfection. Countless silver lines circled around his hands. They were like swimming fishes, swift and agile. Then, these lines began to intertwine and overlap, quickly forming a huge circular Xian formation. As the pattern on the Xian formation became more and more complex, Zhao Zicheng's aura also rose rapidly. In just a few breaths of time, the silver Xian formation was already so complicated that it was dazzling. Buzz! A heavy pressure spread out from the Xian formation. As it slowly rotated, the void at the edge of it was actually silently cut open by black spatial cracks. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the power of this Xian formation was. Shang Guanyu was very surprised. He sat up slightly and stared at the Xian formation. I really didn't expect. Zhao Zicheng has already broken through to become a level 8 Mystic Master. With such pressure, he was definitely a level 8 Mystic Master. It could be seen that he had not slacked off in the past few years, and had been cultivating with all his might. Calculating his age, he was not even 30 years old this year. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, there were very few people who could break through to level 8 Mystic Master at this time. After saying that, Shang Wanyu turned his gaze and looked at Rongxiu opposite him. He was slightly stunned. Rongxiu stood tall and slender with one hand behind his back, looking calm and composed. He actually hasn't moved yet. When Zhao Zicheng had already started and even the high-level Xian formation was about to be completed, Rongxiu actually didn't react at all. Is he planning to give up directly? But even if his strength is not as good as Zhao Zicheng's, he should at least try his best, right? What does he mean by standing still like this? Shang Wanyu couldn't help but frown. Chu Liwa looked at this scene and felt very strange, but more than that, she was curious. To be honest, until now, she still didn't know what level Rongxiu's strength was at. Moreover, today was a Mystic Master competition. She really wanted to see how strong Rongxiu was in this aspect. Zhao Zicheng took in all of Rongxiu's reactions. His mood, which was already bad, instantly became even worse. This scene looked like he was going all out, but Rongxiu didn't care about it all. Zhao Zicheng pursed his lips and injected another stream of force into the Xian formation. A huge figure appeared on the Xian formation. At first glance, it looked like a tiger. Startling tiger formation. Roar. Following this earth-shattering roar, the ferocious tiger suddenly leaped out and went straight for Rongxiu. In the next moment, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of Rongxiu. It was clearly a white lion. Its icy blue eyes stared coldly at the ferocious tiger phantom as it raised its paw indifferently. Swoosh! The white light was like a blade, and in an instant, it tore the incomparably ferocious phantom into pieces. Rongxiu looked up, and his thin lips curved up as he smiled. This won't do. Let's change it to someone I can fight. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 917. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before the crowd could realize what had happened, they saw the white tiger illusion, which had an imposing aura, dissipate in an instant. At this moment, even the Xian formation started to crack. Crack! The originally complicated and powerful Xian formation was instantly covered with spiderweb-like cracks. Zhao Zicheng's heart sank as he quickly retreated. The moment he left his original spot, the huge silver Xian formation shattered instantly. Boom! With a loud bang, the Xian formation turned into countless dazzling rays of light that scattered in all directions. The terrifying impact wreaked havoc in all directions. Zhao Zicheng only felt a tightness in his chest, and the pressure on his shoulders was as heavy as 2 mountains. But at this moment, he no longer had the mood to care about this. He only looked at the Rongxiu in horror. How could this be? How could this be? The Rongxiu didn't even make a move. He only sent out a magical beast and easily destroyed the Xian formation that he had painstakingly set up. And the Rongxiu's words made him even more embarrassed. His face was red and white, and the blood in his chest was surging. He originally thought that he could easily finish off the other party with one move, but he didn't expect that he would be the one at a disadvantage in the end. He was shocked and anxious, and couldn't help but look at the white lion in front of the Rongxiu. Its body was snow white, and only its eyes were ice blue. Its entire body carried a dense chill. Just by standing there quietly, the ground beneath it was already covered with a layer of frost. This is your contracted magical beast?" Zhao Zicheng asked in disbelief. From the attack, just now, this white lion's rank was at least 8th grade, or even higher. It wasn't that Zhao Zicheng had never seen a higher rank magical beast. After all, Chu Yoyue's 9-colored heavenly pheasant was 9th grade. And in the next few years, when he was traveling outside, he was lucky enough to see it once or twice. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but the pressure and aura around this white lion seemed to be even stronger than the 9th grade magical beast he had seen before. Just as this absurd and terrifying thought appeared, Zhao Zicheng immediately extinguished it. Impossible. Any contract between a magical beast and a human had to be based on the conditions. Generally speaking, only when a cultivator was powerful enough would he be able to make a contract with a magical beast willingly. If this white lion was really that Rong Xiu's strength, Zhao Zicheng closed his eyes tightly, trying to get rid of these distracting thoughts, but his back was still drenched in cold sweat. Rong Xiu was probably much stronger than he had expected. Chu Luiwei was originally watching leisurely from the side. When he saw Xue come out, he raised his eyebrows slightly. Judging from Xue's attack just now, its strength was almost on par with a 9th-grade magical beast. She remembered that when they first met, Xue was indeed a high-level magical beast, but it was only around the 7th rank. How did it suddenly become so much stronger? One had to know that the grade of a magical beast was determined from birth. Only a very small number of magical beasts could increase their grade through continuous breakthroughs. And all of those magical beasts were existences with extremely powerful bloodlines. Moreover, even if Xue originally had this potential, it seemed a little impossible for it to break through to this realm in such a short time. Chu Luiwei touched his chin and narrowed his eyes. Could it be that Xue had deliberately hidden its strength in the past? Or it actually hadn't shown its true realm yet? At this moment, Rong Xiu chuckled and nodded. That's right. On this point, I think I should be worthy of you, Dead silence. Everyone present looked at Rong Xiu in shock and speechlessness. What did he mean by that? Now, in the entire Tianling, who didn't know that Chu Luiwei had returned from the death tribulation and ascended to the throne, and a divine beast was following by her side, the red-tailed red phoenix. Didn't Rong Xiu mean that his contracted magical beast was also a divine beast? This time, Shang Wanyu finally couldn't hold back and looked at Chu Luiwei. He actually contracted a divine beast? Why didn't you say before? Just this point alone was enough to earn him a lot of points. After all, in the entire Tianling dynasty, only Chu Luiwei had a divine beast. Chu Luiwei was speechless. She didn't know either. At this time, Shang Wanyu was still looking at the field, so he didn't notice Chu Luiwei's expression and stroked his beard. When did a prince from the empire of Yao Chun become so powerful? No wonder he's so confident. Chu Luiwei was speechless. Actually, she wanted to ask more. In an instant, countless images appeared in her mind. She used to think that Xue was smart and cute, but she never thought that it was actually a divine beast. The key was that in her knowledge, there didn't seem to be a divine beast that looked like a white lion. Rong Xiu had never told her this. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. Even Xue's identity and strength were so shocking. What about Rong Xiu? Zhao Zicheng never expected that Rong Xiu would casually summon a divine beast. Looking at the white lion, his face was still full of disbelief. A divine beast. What kind of person could make a contract with it? Didn't they say that Rong Xiu came from an ordinary background? Where did this divine beast come from? Zhao Zicheng faintly felt uneasy, but at this time, the bet had been set, and the two sides had already started fighting. It was absolutely impossible to stop. He forced himself to calm down, adjust his breath, and began to reconstruct the Xian formation. Previously, he thought that he could win easily, so he didn't use his full strength in the first move. But now, they had to be prepared for battle. Just as Zhao Zicheng began to construct the second Xian formation, a few figures suddenly rushed from the sky outside the palace gate. Your Majesty! Chu Luiwei and Shang Wanyu turned their heads at the same time and saw Elder Chen Ku and a few others coming together. Elder Chen Ku was the first to land. He quickly ran to Chu Luiwei and Shang Wanyu and asked nervously, Your Majesty, what happened here? Why was there such a big commotion just now? A few days ago, a big event had just happened in the palace, and their minds were still in a highly sensitive period. Therefore, when they heard the commotion just now, they immediately rushed over, thinking that it was another fight. After asking, Elder Changku and a few others quickly looked around, but found that there was nothing wrong here. On the training field next to them, there were two people confronting each other. Nothing, it's just these two guys fighting. Shang Guanyu waved his hand, indicating that they didn't need to be nervous. Elder Chun Ku and a few others heaved a sigh of relief. But when they saw the faces of the two people, they were shocked again. What's going on? One of them was Zhao Zicheng. Judging from his breath, the commotion just now was caused by him. And the man in white opposite him, a few people wanted to ask, but they felt that the atmosphere was not right, so they all kept quiet and looked at the field. At this time, Zhao Zicheng's second Qian formation was completed. The pressure on it was obviously much stronger than before. He took a deep breath and used all his strength to send out the Qian formation. One Yang formation, digression, 6 o'clock. Then he just found that a few chapters were blocked. I'll change the text. Woo-woo. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:18. Above the Qian formation, rays of light gathered and slowly rose like a sun. Blinding light shot out from above, making it hard for people to open their eyes. The temperature of the surrounding space suddenly rose. Almost everyone who was standing nearby could feel the burning pain. Elder Chun Ku looked solemn. With a wave of his sleeve, he immediately set up a barrier around the martial arts field. Are the two of them really going to destroy this place completely? He muttered softly with a trace of shock in his eyes. Although the martial arts field in Yuanhe Hall was meticulously built and had a strong endurance, Zhao Zicheng was already a level 8 Qian master. Now that he executed this attack with all his strength, it naturally couldn't be underestimated. There was also the man in white beside him and the white lion beside him. Although he didn't know the identity of this person, judging from the fact that he could easily deal with Zhao Zicheng's Qian formation, he was also extremely powerful. If the two of them really fought, it would really be... Shang Guanyu snorted when he heard that. Now that it was related to you, how could the two of them hold back? However, at first, he was worried that Rongxiu wasn't Zhao Zicheng's match, and that you would be embarrassed if he lost. But now, he felt that he was worrying too much. This Rongxiu was able to contract with a divine beast, so he might have some other trump cards. But how could the seventh prince of country, Yao Chun, be so capable? Due to the impact of the Qian formation, there were already charred marks on the ground. It wasn't hard to imagine how terrifying it would be if all the energy on the ground were to hit one person. The force in Zhao Zicheng's body surged wildly, and his face was slightly pale. This Qian formation was a level 8 Qian formation, and it was also the highest level Qian formation that he could execute. In order to study this Qian formation thoroughly, he had spent a total of 3 years. Normally, even when he was fighting with others, he rarely used this move, because with his current strength, executing this move would consume a lot of his energy. After using this move, regardless of the outcome, he basically wouldn't have the strength to continue fighting. In other words, he could only win if this move won. He drew the last stroke of the Qian formation with difficulty and immediately pushed it forward. Go! A profound formation that was as dazzling as the sun quickly crushed towards Rongxiu. Everywhere it passed, the ground was scorched black, and even the air seemed to be burning. The distance between the two of them wasn't far to begin with, and Zhao Zicheng had used all his strength in this attack. So in the blink of an eye, the Qian formation had already rushed to a distance of 5 steps away from Rongxiu. The berserk energy wreaked havoc and intertwined above the profound formation, and it even stirred up a gale. The corners of Rongxiu's clothes fluttered in the wind. As they fluttered, faint golden patterns could be vaguely seen, like the sparkling ripples on a clear lake in a starry night. At this moment, he finally moved. He raised his right hand and drew a line in the air with his slender fingers. A streak of silver light instantly appeared in front of him. Then, his finger moved slightly and drew another line vertically. Just like that, the two silver origin powers intertwined to form a cross in front of him. This cross was only slightly bigger than a person's palm. Compared to Zhao Zicheng's Xian formation, it was so small that it wasn't even worth mentioning. Zhao Zicheng stared at him. Isn't it a little too late for you to start building a Xian formation now? In the end, he was too careless. Rongxiu looked up slightly, and his thin lips curled into a smile. I'm already done. Zhao Zicheng was stunned. What? Already done? Just because of this little cross? What kind of Xian formation was this? Even a level 1 Xian master wouldn't be able to draw 2 lines so easily and call it a Xian formation. It could be seen that this Rongxiu really didn't know anything about Xian masters. Since that was the case, why did he have to choose a Xian master level to fight with him? Could it be that he just wanted to vent his anger because he was unconvinced? But what was the use of losing like this? Zhao Zicheng couldn't help but feel annoyed. A man with such mediocre strength and character didn't deserve to stand by her side. If you want to prove your strength, there are plenty of ways. Why do you have to do this? Before Zhao Zicheng could finish speaking, he saw Rongxiu turn his wrist and push out the cross. From afar, it looked like a silver butterfly that was about to take flight. That butterfly flew past lightly and quickly arrived in front of the huge Xian formation. Then it directly passed through it. Chi! A faint sound was heard. Zhao Zicheng's voice stopped abruptly. He looked at the scene in front of him in shock and almost suspected that he had seen wrongly. That little cross, did it directly penetrate his profound formation? One had to know that the One-Yang formation contained an extremely abundant amount of force and couldn't be broken so easily. Furthermore, that thing, right at this moment, that terrifying Xian formation suddenly stopped 3 steps away from Rongxiu. In the next moment, the light on the Xian formation quickly dimmed and was covered by a thick layer of ice. Zhao Zicheng suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness. No, crack! The crisp sound of something shattering resounded in the field. After that, the Xian formation shattered into countless pieces. It suddenly dissipated. Zhao Zicheng was severely injured, and his body shook violently. He spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered a step back, almost falling down. The aura around him quickly withered, and his entire body seemed to have been drained of all his strength and spirit. Only that pair of eyes that were filled with shock and horror showed his current mood. You. He opened his mouth with difficulty and could only smell the stench of rust in his mouth. He wasn't the only one. Everyone at the scene was astonished. Just now, Rongxiu actually used that small cross, Xian formation, to defeat Zhao Zicheng. Swoosh! That cross circled half a circle in the air and flew back. Rongxiu raised his hand and easily caught it with his slender fingers. The whole process was as simple as throwing out a dart. There was dead silence. Rongxiu seemed to be unaware of the surrounding people's reactions and looked at Zhao Zicheng. Do you admit defeat? His tone was light and his expression was calm. Looking at that pair of deep and cold phoenix eyes, it seemed to hide countless, unfathomable stormy waves. Zhao Zicheng's heart trembled violently. At this moment, he finally confirmed that Rongxiu was indeed far stronger than him. Others might not know, but just now, when his Xian formation broke, he clearly felt an unparalleled pressure spreading out from that cross Xian formation. That was indeed a Xian formation. If he guessed correctly, there was an even higher level Xian formation hidden within those 2 streams of light. However, Rongxiu did not open it, but it was enough to deal with him. Zhao Zicheng closed his eyes. I admit defeat. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 919. Zhao Zicheng actually admitted defeat just like that. The moment he said that, everyone had a complicated expression on their faces. Actually, they could already foresee this outcome when they saw the previous scene. Zhao Zicheng clearly didn't have the strength to continue fighting, and he had no chance of winning if this dragged on. He was severely injured, but Rongxiu didn't even move a single step from the beginning to the end. Looking at the entire scene, he merely raised his hand and casually swiped twice. What was the point of continuing the fight? It was only right for him to admit defeat now. But Who would have expected such an outcome 15 minutes ago? Zhao Zicheng was a level 8 Xian master. Elder Chun Ku, did you see it clearly just now? Was that a Xian formation or not? A few elders from the royal family couldn't help but ask softly. Elder Chen Ku frowned and took a deep breath. That was indeed a Xian formation. Hearing this, the elders looked at each other in dismay. But how can a Xian formation be like that? It's just two forces intertwined. How can it break a level 8 Xian formation so easily? Elder Chun Ku stared at Rong Xiao in the arena and didn't explain further. Why? Why else could it be? Naturally, it was because the cross Xian formation executed by Rong Xiao was stronger than Zhao Zicheng's. Generally speaking, the higher the level of Xian master, the better their control over their force. Under such circumstances, the more complicated the Xian formation was, the stronger its power. This was also why everyone was puzzled by Rong Xiao's victory. In the eyes of ordinary people, that thing of his might not even be considered a Xian formation, but it clearly contained a power that was stronger than a level 8 Xian formation, and it easily destroyed it. Elder Chun Ku faintly recalled that there was once a rumor that a top-notch Xian master could turn complex Xian formations into extremely simple diagrams, and they could also possess terrifying power. Could it be? Rong Xiao was like that. But those who could reach such a level were all. Where exactly did this Rong Xiao come from? Elder Chun Ku couldn't help but ask. He is the 7th prince of country Yao Chun and also Yu Er's fiancé. Shangwan Yu also came back to his senses at this time. Hearing Elder Chun Ku's question in a low voice, he answered solemnly. The elders were all taken aback. Yao Chun? Isn't that the place where Chu Luiyue came back? It seemed to be just a vassal country of Tianling. How could there be such a strong person? Shangwan Yu let out a long sigh, but the waves in his heart still hadn't calmed down. He looked at Rong Xiao with admiration in his eyes. He glanced at Chu Luiyue and sighed meaningfully. Yu Er's words are true. This Rong Xiao's talent and strength were indeed not inferior to hers. Just her talent as a mystic cultivator was enough to crush Zhao Zicheng. Not to mention the fact that he had formed a contract with a divine beast. Even if he didn't have a high status, having this was enough. That trace of doubt from before had completely dissipated at this moment. Shangwan Yu's heart was finally at ease. Chu Luiyue blinked her eyes and didn't know whether to laugh or cry for a moment. In fact, even she didn't know that Rong Xiao was so strong in this aspect. Even she might not be able to withstand that blow just now. Rong Xiao, how did he cultivate to such a level? Shangwan Yu stood up and looked at Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao, very good. Rong Xiao nodded with a smile and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, you flatter me. How is that a compliment? Shangwan Yu had a good first impression of Rong Xiao. Now that he had witnessed his strength with his own eyes, he admired him even more. You are worthy of it. Rong Xiao's eyebrows moved slightly, and the smile in his eyes deepened. It seemed that today's visit to his father-in-law was quite successful. Shangwan Yu turned his gaze and looked at Zhao Zicheng. Come, help second young master Zhao to have a good rest. Zhao Zicheng's face turned red and white. Thank you for your kindness, Your Majesty. Zicheng is fine and can go back on his own. It was enough to lose this round. If he had to be helped away again, he would lose face. Zhao Zicheng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, gritted his teeth, and looked up at Rong Xiao. You are indeed strong. There was no sarcasm or jealousy in this sentence. It came from the bottom of his heart. He was really convinced. I admit that I am not as strong as you. I admit defeat. Tomorrow, I will leave West Hill and won't disturb you anymore. When he said this, Zhao Zicheng felt as if his heart had been pierced by countless silver needles. His heart was filled with pain. He turned his head and glanced at Chu Luiyue. A glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Then he smiled. Although he didn't get what he wanted this time, he didn't regret it. He had said and done what he needed to do. He had no regrets. Please, treat her well in the future. Zhao Zicheng covered his chest and coughed violently. Rong Xiao's eyes darkened. She is the person in my heart. I will naturally cherish her 1,000 times more than anyone else. Zhao Ziqing laughed self-deprecatingly. That's true. I worried too much. This man was completely different from Jiang Yuqing. He could give her the best. Thinking of this, Zhao Ziqing turned and left. Rongxiu also walked toward Chuluwei. After taking 2 steps, Zhao Ziqing stopped again. He turned around and asked hesitantly, "Can I ask you a question?" Rongxiu looked sideways. Zhao Ziqing held his breath and asked, How? How did you cultivate to this level?" Rongxiu thought of something, and a faint smile suddenly appeared on his face. "You were taught me." He had no interest in being a mystic master. He only practiced to accompany her for a while. Digression. Rongxiu. God knows how many skills I learned to pursue my wife. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 920. Zhao Ziqing choked and felt that Rongxiu was joking. Back then, Shang Wanyu did have astonishing talent in mystic cultivation, but she was also a level 8 mystic cultivator back then. It was impossible for her to teach someone like Rongxiu, who could crush level 8 mystic cultivators. It seemed like he didn't want to say it. However, Zhao Ziqing didn't mind. The cultivation of mystic cultivators was different from that of martial artists. They usually needed a master to teach them step by step. This way, the master-disciple relationship would be closer. Rongxiu might have his own considerations for not telling him his master. After all, there were indeed many reclusive experts in this world who didn't like to show their faces in public and didn't like to casually reveal their identities. To be able to nurture a disciple like Rongxiu, he must not be a simple person. Zhao Ziqing cupped his hands and didn't ask any more questions. He turned around and limped away. His back, which was originally considered tall and slender, now had a hint of loneliness. "Did you just say that I taught you?" Chu Liwen narrowed her black eyes and asked when she saw Rongxiu walking over. She had just recovered to level 6 mystic cultivation and had yet to cross the threshold of level 7. The strength he displayed just now wasn't something she could teach. "I actually didn't know that I had such an outstanding disciple. Also, this disciple is like me and has contracted a divine beast." As Chu Liwen spoke, she turned her gaze and glanced at Shui, who had followed Rongxiu over and was about to pounce over happily. Shui's movements froze. For a moment, it didn't know whether to go forward or retreat. Under Chu Yue's scrutinizing gaze, Shui felt guilty. It shook its head and looked around. Actually, it didn't want to hide it. If it wasn't for Master's request, it wouldn't lie to her. Rongxiu suddenly smiled. "We've played chess together so many times. Even if I don't want to learn, I know a little." Chu Luiwei was stunned. Only then did he understand what Rongxiu meant. From a certain point of view, a chess game and a profound formation shared an extremely high degree of similarity. Moreover, it tested one's agility and flexibility to an extreme degree. Usually, when she played chess, she would mix it with the Xian formation sometimes. Rongxiu's words seemed to make sense. However, the doubts in Chu Yue's heart had not been completely eliminated. Even if Rongxiu was just joking, the top-notch talent and strength that he displayed could not be mistaken. She actually didn't know that he was so powerful above mystic cultivators. There seemed to be countless mysteries hidden in his body. He was mysterious and unfathomable. However, when those eyes were looking at her, they were so sincere and clean. They were open and honest, without any concealment. She could feel his heart and inexplicably felt that no matter what, he would always stand by her side and shelter her from the wind and rain. In fact, she didn't trust people so easily. However, when facing Rongxiu, trust and dependence seemed to have become instinctive. Everything became natural. Chu Liwei pondered for a moment and looked at Shang Wanyu. "Father, I want to talk to Rongxiu alone." How could Shang Wanyu not see that Chu Liwei had something to ask Rongxiu? He immediately agreed. "Anyway, I've already seen him. Yu has a good eye. If there's anything, you could discuss it yourselves." After saying that, he patted Rongxiu's shoulder meaningfully and left. Elder Chun wanted to go forward and ask a few questions. Seeing that Shang Wanyu had left, he swallowed the rest of his words and left with the other elders. However, after walking for a long distance, Elder Chun Ku still looked dignified. That Rong Xiao doesn't seem to be as simple as he looks on the surface. When most of the people around had left, Chu Luiwei said, "Let's go back to Zhao Yu Hall." Rong Xiao stepped forward and held her hand with a doting smile on his lips. "Okay." Chu Luiwei glared at him. "What are you doing?" Rong Xiao turned his face, leaned closer, and chuckled. "Exercising my fiancé's rights." The news that Chu Luiwei had a fiancé from Prince Yao Chen's seventh prince spread rapidly in the palace, as if it had grown wings. At the same time, Zhao Ziqing challenged Chu Luiwei to a battle in order to marry her. In the end, he lost miserably, which immediately became the topic of everyone's conversation. When most people heard the first news, they were just shocked and surprised. But thinking about it carefully, this was actually quite normal. After all, Chu Luiwei seemed to be a girl from a fallen family in country Yaochun. Marrying a prince was actually a social climb. However, the second news was too strange. Who was Zhao Ziqing? The second son of the Zhao family. The most outstanding genius of the Zhao family's younger generation. Even though he wasn't in Xiling these few years, most people still remembered how amazing he was back then. They heard that he had already broken through the bottleneck and become a level 8 mystic master. That Rong Xiao actually defeated him. It was simply unbelievable. Didn't this prove that he was even more outstanding than Zhao Ziqing? A prince from a small affiliated country? These things quickly caused a huge uproar in Xiling, and Rong Xiao's name quickly became the focus of everyone's discussion. No matter how turbulent the undercurrents were outside, Zhao Yu Hall was silent at this moment. Chu Luiwei dismissed her attendants, leaving only her and Rong Xiao in the room. Oh, and Shui. Ever since she came in, Shui had consciously found a corner to lie down, looking as if she had been wronged and admitted her mistake. Looking at its drooping brows, those who didn't know would think that it had just suffered a huge blow. Who would be able to compare this listless white lion with the divine beast that tore an 8th-level Xian formation apart with a single claw? However, Chu Luiwei was rather satisfied with Shui's proactive attitude of admitting its mistakes. Compared to its master, it was simply too obedient. Chu Luiwei looked at Rong Xiao and narrowed her eyes dangerously. "Rong Xiao, don't you have anything to say to me?" Rong Xiao's long eyelashes fluttered, and he smiled. What do you want to hear?" Asking the obvious. Chu Luiwei's gaze scanned him from head to toe. "Then, let's start with your strength. You should be a level 9 Mystic Master now, right?" Rong Xiao's lips moved slightly. He wanted to say no, but he swallowed the words back. He nodded. Hearing him admitted himself, Chu Luiwei, who had already expected this, still felt her brows twitch fiercely. Even back then, she couldn't cross the threshold of level 9 Mystic Master. She didn't expect Rong Xiao to be one long ago. "Why didn't you say so before?" Chu Luiwei's tone carried a hint of warning. Rong Xiao blinked innocently. "You didn't ask." Chu Luiwei. She couldn't refute this. "Then let me ask you now. Other than being a level 9 Mystic Master, are you also a celestial physician?" Chu Luiwei took a deep breath and asked. Rong Xiao slowly leaned back in his chair and tapped the table rhythmically with one hand. After a moment, he looked up. There seemed to be a dense light in his eyes, and his voice was low and languid. "What do you think? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 921. Chu Luiwei's eyebrows twitched. The meaning of Rong Xiao's words was self-explanatory. She narrowed her eyes. "Then, your celestial physician rank." Rong Xiao pondered for a moment and smiled faintly. "I know a little." Chu Luiwei's mouth twitched. She would be a fool to believe him. Since one of the disciples of Mingyue Tianshan, so powerful, Chu Luiwei had never been to Mingyue Tianshan personally, but she knew a little about it. Minghua Tianshan was a sect that was independent of the various empires and had a rather aloof feeling. Compared to empires of Yao Chen's level, it was a little stronger. This was also the reason why Rongxiu was sent to Minghua Tianshan when he was born in poor health. There were powerhouses that the Yao Chen Empire could not match. However, although Minghua Tianshan was powerful, it was still outside Heaven's canopy and could not be compared to the Tianling dynasty. Then, how do they nurture a powerhouse like Rongxiu? Rongxiu seemed to have seen through her doubts, so he leaned back and looked at her with interest. You were born in Yaochen. Aren't you already a powerhouse that ordinary people can't reach? Chu Luiwei was speechless for a moment. After her rebirth, she did not have the Tianjing Yuan Meridian from her previous life. It was almost as if she had to start from scratch. She had indeed suffered a lot on the way back from Yaochun to Xiling. At the same time, she had encountered enough luck to be where she was today. If she could do it, why couldn't others? Moreover, from the beginning, she had already determined that Rongxiu was extremely dangerous. At that time, she had already expected that he was extraordinary. But now, she clearly realized that she was much stronger than he had imagined. Chu Luiwei was silent for a while before she said, Rongxiu, you still haven't told me where your identity as the Son of God came from. As soon as he finished speaking, the room fell into silence. Rongxiu looked in her eyes. There seemed to be waves of light swirling in his phoenix eyes, like a whirlpool that could completely devour people. After a while, Rongxiu suddenly said, Do you still remember my mother? Chu Luiwei was a little surprised by his sudden question, but he still nodded. Who didn't know Consort Wan, who was the queen of the empire of Yao Chen's harem back then? Rongxiu smiled, but there was no smile in his eyes. His voice was extremely light. The so-called Holy Son is my identity in my mother's family. Chu Luiwei had thought of many answers before, but none of them were close to this. His mother's family? Didn't they say that Consort Wan came from an ordinary family? How come now? Chu Luiwei suddenly recalled the day when the third prince led his troops to rebel. Rongxiu and Emperor Jiawen seemed to have a decisive battle. At that time, when Emperor Jiawen wanted to break through and enter Heaven's canopy, Rongxiu once said something. He seemed to have said that his mother's wish in life was to not let Emperor Jiawen step into Heaven's canopy. Yes, now that he thought about it, the cause and effect of everything could be explained. Chu Luiwei widened her eyes slightly. Why your mother is from Heaven's canopy? Rongxiu nodded. Chu Luiwei was dazed for quite a while. I see. She had suspected it before, but as too many things happened later on, she had thrown this matter to the back of her mind. This means that Rongxiu is actually from Heaven's canopy. His mother's status is clearly much higher than Emperor Jiawen's. Back then, my mother went out of Heaven's canopy to train. When she met with danger in a territory, she met Father by accident, and the two of them got together. But when they got married, my mother didn't know Father's identity. Rongxiu lightly said. Chu Luiwei pressed her lips against each other. Even though Rongxiu said it very simply, she could roughly guess the ins and outs of the matter. A woman from Heaven's canopy who married Emperor Jiawen was marrying a lower status. Besides, from various situations, Rongxiu's mother's clan didn't seem to be an ordinary family. Consort One was young and naive. When she met Emperor Jiawen, she thought that she was destined to be with him. So she didn't hesitate to be with him. In the end, she didn't expect that she would marry an emperor with a harem of 3,000. No one would be willing to accept and forgive such deceit. It was no wonder that there were rumors that after Consort One entered the palace, she was still depressed, even though Emperor Jiawen doted on her a lot. She only stayed in the palace for a year or two before moving out. She also didn't go back until she died. As for her background, it should be made up by Emperor Jiawen. After I was born, Mother sent me to Minghua Tianshan. A few years later, the clan's people came and wanted to bring Mother and me back. It was a pity that Mother had already passed away. Rongxiu's tone was calm, and his expression was quiet as if he were talking about someone else's matters. Back then, Mother secretly married an outsider, and it went against the clan's rules. After she found out about father's identity, she became a concubine and was too ashamed to return home. Thus, she kept hiding from the clanspeople until she passed away. Actually, back then, she sent Rongxiu to Mingyue Tianshan because she didn't want his identity to be exposed. She thought that she could be at ease if she handed Rongxiu over there. However, many things that she didn't expect happened after that. Of course, she wouldn't know about all of this. Chu Liwa looked at him with a normal expression as if she had already seen through all of this, but her heart still ached slightly. So, all these years, you haven't been staying at Mingyue Tianshan? She asked softly. Rongxiu responded. I would come back occasionally, but I wouldn't stay for long. I didn't find a suitable time to tell you about this. Are you still angry? Chu Liwa sighed in her heart and shook her head. It was naturally very difficult for him to return to the clan with such a background. Rongxiu had a grudge against Emperor Jiawen, and they had completely fallen out back then. Hence, he definitely wouldn't be willing to go back to Emperor Yao Chun. This was probably one of the reasons why he decided to give Emperor Yao Chen's throne to the third prince after planning everything. As for his mother's family, it was obvious that his identity was a little awkward. Rongxiu, it must have been tough on you all these years, right? From what Rongxiu said previously, it wasn't hard to guess how strict consort Wan's family was. And Rongxiu, to them, they might not be willing to accept him. Rongxiu thought for a while. It's all right. Even if he obtained the position of Prince of Grace, many people were eyeing him covetously, and many wanted to rebel. Hence, it was a little troublesome to deal with them. Rongxiu nodded and saw her heart-aching eyes. He smiled slightly, held her hand tightly, and pulled her into his embrace. Her gentle and sweet aura instantly filled his arms. He hugged her slender waist and buried his head in her shoulder, smelling the faint fragrance of her cloud-like hair. A certain empty place in his heart seemed to have been filled. I'm fine. He spoke softly as if he was murmuring and pouring out his heart. I have you, with you, it's enough. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. Chapter 922. Chu Liu's heart softened, and she lowered her head and gently kissed him on the lips. It was slightly cool and soft. Rongxiu, I'll be your family in the future, okay? She retreated half an inch, stared into his eyes, and said seriously. Even though Rongxiu didn't say it, she could feel the lonely aura on him, as if it came from his bones. His hands were cold, and so were his lips, but she thought his heart was warm. If he was alone in this world, she was willing to stay by his side. With true love, as close as family. She didn't want to ask anything else. She only knew that he was him. Everything else had nothing to do with them. Whether he was the seventh prince of Yao Chun or the holy son of a certain family, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were each other's. Rongxiu looked at her. Suddenly, he hugged her tightly with one hand, held her face with the other, and kissed her. His hand was very strong, as if he wanted to crush her into his bones and blood. However, his other hand was unbelievably careful, as if he was holding a rare treasure and was afraid of bumping into it. Amidst the endless madness, there was also a strong restraint that was filled with love. The vague words scattered between his lips and teeth. Okay. Rongxiu's victory over Zhao Zicheng had a far greater impact than expected, because other than Zhao Zicheng, there were many young talents in Shilling City who had some thoughts about Chu Liu. Whether it was identity, appearance, or talent, the current Chu Liu was absolutely top-notch. When she was still the princess, countless people admired her. Now that she had killed Jiang Yuqing and Shangwan Wan, ascended to the throne, and returned in glory, countless people naturally bowed to her. However, Rongxiu's appearance instantly disrupted these people's thoughts. Zhao Zicheng was the first to be beaten up. The rest of the people naturally calmed down and had to think carefully. Even a level 8 mystic master was defeated by Rongxiu. One could imagine how strong he was. It was impossible to say that he wasn't afraid. But at the same time, there were also many people who were skeptical. Zhao Zicheng was a famous genius in the Western tomb and could be said to be one of the best among the younger generation. How could he lose to a mere prince from Yaochun? However, the news did indeed come from the palace. It was said that there were many people who saw it with their own eyes for a time. There were different opinions, which made many people curious about Rongxiu. Countless people wanted to see for themselves what kind of person this Rongxiu was. Chu Luiyue had originally planned to wait until the matters in the Tianling dynasty were settled before confessing everything to Rongxiu and putting the wedding on the agenda. However, he did not expect that Chu Ning would be taken away. After this incident, the wedding could not be carried out for the time being. Even though the other party didn't seem to want to hurt Chu Ning on the note, Chu Luiyue was still very worried. From the beginning until now, the other party knew her identity like the back of his hand. It was obvious that he was targeting her. However, she knew nothing about the other party. After thinking about it, she asked Rongxiu again. This time, Rongxiu didn't hesitate and nodded directly. He knew where the note came from. But when Chu Luiyue wanted to continue asking, Rongxiu didn't continue to answer and only said that it was not suitable for her to know these things now. Chu Luiyue was a little confused by this answer. Then, when will I find out? Rongxiu paused. The current Chu Luiyue was only a rank 6 warrior. Even if she knew these things, there was nothing she could do, and it would only increase her worries. If you break through to rank 7 in a month, I will tell you. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Breaking through to rank 7 wasn't difficult for her. The difficult part was achieving her goal in this short month. One had to know that she had just returned from the Red Moon Desert and had just reached the middle of rank 6. This speed was already very fast. If she broke through to rank 7, it would be terrifying. As if seeing her concerns, Rongxiu smiled. If you trust me, I will be your sparring partner for this month. How about it? Chu Luiyue looked at his confident and calm smile, and her heart suddenly ignited with fighting spirit. It's a deal. There was also a martial arts field in the backyard of Xiaoyu Hall. It was even bigger and of higher quality than the one in Yuana Hall. This was because this was the place where Chu Luiyue used to cultivate. Other than the ground being paved with incomparably hard green stones, there was a level 9 Xian formation on the entire martial arts training ground as a protection. It could ensure that any fluctuations produced in the martial arts training ground would not casually spread to the outside and would not harm others. Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu stood face to face. As the order had already been given, there were no palace servants around to serve them. There were only the two of them in the huge martial arts field. Chu Luiyue looked at Rongxiu opposite her. Thinking that the two of them had known each other for so long, but had never really fought, she couldn't help but be eager to try. She had long known that Rongxiu was very strong. It wasn't easy to wait until now, and she was able to recover a part of her strength. Perhaps she could compete with him? With that thought, Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. Rongxiu looked at her excited face and raised his eyebrows slightly. This familiar scene was really nostalgic. Rongxiu, you don't have to go easy on me later. Just attack. Chu Luiyue was sure that she wouldn't be a match for Rongxiu in terms of Xian master. But for martial artists, that might not be the case. After all, although she looked like she was only at the middle of rank 6, her combat power had already reached the level of a rank 7 martial artist. The bitter training she had gone through in the Red Moon Desert wasn't for nothing. Rongxiu smiled and responded. Okay. Shui, who was lying in the field, looked at her master with disdain. You don't even have a draft when you lie, Pui? Rongxiu sensed Shui's gaze and glanced at it coldly. Let's not talk about the past. Now that you hadn't fully recovered, if he really attacked without holding back and hurt his wife, he would be the one feeling heartache. What else could he do if he could only pamper the wife he pursued? At this moment, Chu Luiyue moved and went straight for Rongxiu. She was extremely fast. In the Red Moon Desert, Chu Luiyue's most obvious improvement was her close combat power after fighting with those puppets. Therefore, her speed had increased by a lot. In addition, now that she had recovered her identity, she didn't need to hide the many cultivation techniques that she had cultivated in the past. Naturally, It was more convenient. In the blink of an eye, the slender and tall figure had already rushed in front of Rongxiu. She clenched her fist and threw a punch. Before she could see how Rongxiu moved, his figure had already disappeared in front of her. Chu Luiwen missed her attack, so she turned around without thinking and gave a side kick. Bang! Rongxiu easily clamped down on her ankle with one hand. Chu Luiwen was shocked and took advantage of the situation to flip in the air. Rongxiu quickly released his hand and avoided her attack. Tisk, are you trying to murder your husband? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 923. Chu Luiwen landed lightly on the ground like a swallow. She looked at Rongxiu and snorted when she heard his teasing. You can easily block my attack without using your full strength. Isn't it inappropriate for you to say that? Rongxiu didn't even make a move just now. He just defended himself. But even so, she was still able to sense that his cultivation level was definitely far above hers. As you are his sparring partner, you have to have some strength. Otherwise, what if you get beaten down? Rongxiu raised his hand with his palm facing up. He bent his fingers slightly and said with a smile, "Are you coming?" Chu Luiwen gritted her teeth. The force in her body surged crazily, and her aura rose to its peak. A star gradually flickered on the tip of her finger. Come, Jingshin finger. It was impossible to pose any threat to Rongxiu with a small fight. She could only go all out now. A satisfied smile flashed across Rongxiu's eyes. If she wanted to improve her strength quickly and steadily, she had to constantly challenge her limits. Coincidentally, he knew where her limits were the best. Therefore, he was the most suitable person to be this person. In the next moment, a cluster of golden flames appeared in Rongxiu's palm. After Elder Chun Ku returned, he pondered for a long time and finally went to see Shang Wanyu. When he arrived at Yuanhe Hall, Shang Wanyu was reading in his room. He raised his head when he heard the commotion. You're finally here. He didn't look surprised. Apparently, he had already expected this. Please take a seat. Elder Chun Ku was an elder of 3 dynasties. His status was extraordinary. Even Shang Wanyu had to be polite to him. Seeing Shang Wanyu's reaction, Elder Chun Ku knew that they were thinking about the same thing. Therefore, he didn't stand on ceremony and sat down. It seems that His Majesty also feels that something is wrong. Elder Chun Ku frowned and went straight to the point. That Rongxiu's identity. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Based on the strength that he had displayed previously, how could a prince of country, Yao Chan, possess such strength? Even if he was talented, without sufficient resources and opportunities, it was impossible for him to reach his current level. I've seen his father before. Shang Wanyu put down the book in his hand and suddenly said such a sentence. Mediocre and mediocre. Even if such a person was fortunate enough to give birth to a talented child, it wouldn't be too exaggerated. Rongxiu was obviously far surpassed the standard. You mean? Elder Chun Ku was bewildered. I have a feeling I've seen his aura before. Shang Wanyu rubbed his temples. But I can't remember at the moment. However, he had a good impression of Rongxiu the moment he saw him. Therefore, she didn't continue to ask him many questions, but let you ask him. Elder Chun, what are you? Since he is here, he must have something. Elder Chun Ku hesitated for a while. Is Zhou's? Too. Shang Wanyu paused and looked up with a sharp glint in his eyes. Elder Chun Ku, do you think so too? Level 9 mystic cultivators are extremely strong, just like level 9 warriors. They are only one step away from the next level. There are only a few of such cultivators in the entire Tianling dynasty. Rongxiu is so young, but he's already at this level. Other than that side, who else can nurture such a person? Shang Wanyu stroked his beard and seemed to agree. That's what I think too. Was born with a Tianjing Yuan meridian and was a once-in-a-thousand-years genius. That's why she could reach a level that ordinary people can't reach in their lifetime. As for Rongxiu, he couldn't see through. Taizu should know more about this matter, right? Elder Chanko looked a little serious. But it seems that Taizu didn't talk to her about this. Taizu must have his own considerations. Maybe he's already told you. Shang Wenyu pondered for a moment. Now that Yu has ascended to the throne, many things have settled down. I'll find a time to talk to her in detail. Elder Chun nodded and then murmured curiously. If Rong Xiu is really someone from that side, why did he appear as Prince Yao Chun? His majesty was killed back then, and he was reborn over there. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? There was one more thing that Elder Chun Ku didn't say. If Rong Xiu's real identity is really as we think, then it's really hard to say who's going to marry who in this marriage. Shang Wenyu fell into deep thought and waved his hand. Forget it. As long as you recognizes him and he recognizes you, it's fine. As for the rest, there's no need to care so much. By the way, I asked you to investigate Jiang Yuqing before. What did you find out? Elder Chun Ku calmed down and sat up straight. His expression was much more serious. You don't say. I really found something wrong. Jiang Yuqing seems to have been secretly contacting someone in the past few years. Moreover, it seems that he has been following the other party's orders and has been working for the other party. It's just that he has been very secretive, so we can't find out who the other party is. Shang Wenyu snorted coldly. So, there's really a master behind him? Yes. In addition, Elder Chun Ke hesitated for a moment and stopped talking. In addition? Shang Wenyu asked. In addition, Mu Qing seems to have something to do with this matter. Shang Wenyu frowned tightly. He's Jiang Yuqing's man. It's normal to have something to do with him. No. Elder Chun Ku shook his head. If Mu Qing is simply Jiang Yuqing's subordinate, it stands to reason that she is not qualified to contact the person behind this. But that's not the case. She seems to have contacted the person behind Jiang Yuqing's back. Digression. The fifth update is a little late. Happy Chinese Valentine's Day, everyone. Don't forget to receive the monthly red packet. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 924. Really? This time, Shang Wenyu was really taken aback. After thinking for a moment, he slowly said, in this case, Mu Qing may not be completely Jiang Yuqing's man. But what was his purpose for doing this? When you asked if Mu Qing had betrayed her, Mu Qing admitted it without hesitation. From the beginning to the end, he didn't defend himself. Mu Qing was personally trained and promoted by you. Compared to others, their relationship was naturally much deeper, and his actions made you feel a sense of betrayal, which was even more intense compared to other people. According to what Mu Qing has said before, he was Jiang Yuqing's man from the beginning. But from the current situation, it seemed that there was something fishy. If there was an inside story, why did he have to do this? As if he couldn't wait to be sentenced to death? Is Mu Qing still imprisoned in the Mu Mansion? Yes. Shang Wenyu stood up, but after taking 2 steps, he stopped again. Elder Chun Ku asked tentatively, Your Majesty, do you want to go to the Mu Mansion and ask in person? Shang Wenyu put one hand behind his back and shook his head. Forget it. If he doesn't want to say, no one can get anything out of him. I'll tell you this news when I have the chance in the future. I'll make a decision later. Elder Chun nodded and asked again, then, Rong Xiu, let's wait and see first. Yes. Mu Mansion. The courtyard was cold and cheerless. Other than a few armored blackguards patrolling the area, there was no one else around. Jian Fengqi stood at the door. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but sigh with mixed feelings. Sigh. In the past, although Mu Mansion was only guarded by the Black Cavalry, the atmosphere at that time was very different from now. In the past, it was still a bit lively, but now it was no different from a prison. He had always stayed away from this kind of place, but now he had to come. Jian Fengqi, you're here again? A figure flashed, and SHI appeared. After removing Lei Laoxi's mask, the current Mitsui looked much more refined than before, and he was also thinner than before. However, he still looked very strong and sturdy. In addition to his tyrannical strength, he was able to create an invisible pressure just by standing there. Jian Fengqi coughed. It's fine if you come once or twice, but you come every day. Mitsui looked at him suspiciously, smacked his lips, and finally couldn't help but ask the question that had been bothering him. What is he trying to do? Jian Fengqi accepted his fate and walked inside. Is he still doing nothing in his room today? Yeah. Shi shrugged. You can go by yourself. Ever since His Highness came, the three of them had a talk in the room. He didn't know what they said, but after that, their reactions were very strange. His Highness seemed to be in a daze, and after she left, Jian Fengqi scolded Mu Qinghe for an hour in exasperation. He didn't say anything specific, but the main idea was that she didn't know what was good for her. As for Mu Qinghe, since that day, he had been staying in his room and never came out. His Highness didn't restrict his freedom when he locked him up in the Mu residence, but he didn't seem to want to come out. Hence, ever since then, Jian Fengqi came every day. However, it didn't seem to be effective. Mu Qinghe was a stubborn person who would not be moved by force or persuasion. Shi crossed his arms and shook his head. Actually, he couldn't figure it out either. Back then, Her Highness was devoted to Mu Qinghe and was even more devoted to him than to the 13th U Guard. How could Mu Qinghe, this ingrate, betray Her Highness? Yet His Highness didn't have the intention to kill him until now. Shi swung the hammer in his hand and walked away. The door wasn't locked. Jian Fengqi pushed the door open and saw Mu Qinghe sitting there. Hearing the noise, he didn't react, as if he didn't care at all. Seeing him like this, Jian Fengqi was furious. He snorted and leaned against the door frame. Are you going to be like this forever? Mu Qinghe didn't say anything. Are you happy to say those words on purpose and make her run away? Jian Fengqi frowned. His eyes, which had always been flirtatious, seemed to be covered with a layer of thick frost at this time. Mu Qinghe finally reacted. I'm just telling the truth. If you do something wrong, you should be punished. Jian Fengqi was so angry that his teeth itched. Bullshit. Now isn't the time for you to beg me to help her find evidence? Jian Fengqi quickly stepped forward and grabbed Mu Qinghe's collar. Believe it or not, I'm going to tell her everything right now. Mu Qinghe frowned and pried his hand away. It doesn't matter if you tell her. Can you prove that I have nothing to do with what happened in the past? You dash. It doesn't matter whether she kills me or not. Now that the truth is out, everything is fine, isn't it? I think you're. Jian Fengqi wasn't happy to hear this. He was about to hit him again when he inadvertently caught a glimpse of blood on the back of his hand. He suddenly froze and took a closer look. He wasn't injured, and Mu Qinghe was the only one who touched his hand just now. This was Mu Qinghe's blood. Jian Fengqi's face suddenly changed. What's wrong with you? Mu Qinghe saw the blood on the back of his hand and frowned. He was so careless. It's nothing. Mu Qinghe said lightly. She nonchalantly took a handkerchief from the side and wiped the blood off her hand. But that white handkerchief was soon completely stained with blood. The corner of Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched violently. The amount of blood, Mu Qinghe was bleeding. Something was clearly wrong. He chased after Mu Qinghe and made a move, wanting to grab him. Mu Qinghe dodged easily, but she lost her balance and crashed into the chair next to her. Mu Qinghe managed to catch her with difficulty, but her face turned pale and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Jian Fengqi was even more shocked. This is dash thump. Mu Qinghe fainted and suddenly collapsed to the ground. Zhaoyu Palace. Time passed by minute. Unknowingly, it was already evening. The sun was setting in the west, reflecting a gorgeous glow on the thick clouds. The sparring between Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu had finally come to an end. Her clothes were drenched in sweat, and her strength was almost completely exhausted. On the other hand, other than Rong Xiu's slightly messy clothes, there was nothing unusual about him. It was as if he had just taken a leisurely stroll instead of sparring with Chu Luiwei for so long. Chu Luiwei panted heavily, looking at Rong Xiu, and couldn't help but grind her teeth. This man had always suppressed his strength to a level higher than hers. How infuriating. You actually hid so much of your strength. She was about to walk forward but her body went limp and she fell forward directly. Rongxiu went forward and pulled her into his arms, then carried her horizontally with a smile on his lips. Not all. I'm just a little stronger than you are this time. You'll definitely win next time. Chu Luiyue pinched his face and snorted heavily. I'll definitely surpass you next time on the Qingyan roll. Digression. Happy Chinese Valentine's Day again, mobile users. Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 925. Rongxiu's movements suddenly paused. His brows twitched imperceptibly as he looked at Chu Luiyue in his arms and slowly asked, "What did you just say?" Chu Luiyue was also stunned. The Azure Cloud Roll, what was that? Why would she suddenly say such a thing? It was as if she had said the same thing before. I don't know either, Chu Luiyue murmured and immediately frowned as she kept recalling and searching in her mind. But she couldn't remember anything. Rongxiu stared at her face and saw a faint layer of doubt in her eyes. His hanging heart relaxed a little. He calmly turned his gaze away and lowered his eyelids to hide the emotions in his eyes. I'll send you back first. Chu Luiyue nodded absent-mindedly as she wrapped her arms around Rongxiu's neck and leaned on his shoulder as she thought about what had just happened. The Azure Cloud Roll. She said that she must win against Rongxiu on the Azure Cloud Roll next time. Rongxiu. She suddenly spoke and glanced at Rongxiu. Have you heard of the Azure Cloud Roll? The man shook his head as the afterglow shone on his smooth and perfect side profile. It was still breathtaking, but he didn't say anything. Chu Luiyue had some doubts in her heart. Rongxiu's meaning was that he didn't know. But why would she say such a thing to Rongxiu just now? Perhaps this was related to the memory she had lost? Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought and planned to find a chance to think about it when she returned. Rongxiu carried her and walked back. Fortunately, after Chu Luiyue returned, she had cleaned up the people in the palace. There were almost no palace servants left in Zhaoyu Hall. In addition, this martial arts field was a relatively private place in Zhaoyu Hall. From here, she could directly return to her sleeping quarters. Rongxiu didn't meet anyone along the way, so he directly carried her to her bedroom. Just as he shouted, he suddenly realized that the person in his arms was quiet. He looked down and saw that the woman in his arms was leaning on his shoulder with her eyes closed. Her breathing was even and she seemed to have fallen asleep. Rongxiu couldn't help but laugh, but he also felt a little heartache. It was probably because the previous training was too tiring. However, the fact that she could fall asleep so quickly in his arms proved that she was at ease. This made Rongxiu feel a lot more relieved. He carefully placed her on the bed, wiped her sweat, and covered her with a thin blanket. Looking at her peaceful sleeping face, Rongxiu's eyes gradually overflowed with gentleness. When she was like this in the past, although she was often exhausted, it was very rare for her to fall asleep directly. Returning to the West Hill for revenge this time must have consumed a lot of her energy and mental energy. It was a good thing that she could have a good rest now. Rongxiu held her wrist. A pure and gentle energy slowly flowed into her body. In her sleep, she seemed to be dreaming of something and whispered something. Rongxiu listened and vaguely heard that it was related to the green cloud roll. He frowned slightly. Now that she had not broken through to the 7th level, it was reasonable to say that that thing was still sealed in her body and she should not be thinking of this. But it seemed that it was much faster than he had expected. With the nourishment of Rongxiu's power, Chu Luiyue's brows gradually relaxed, and she finally fell asleep peacefully. Rongxiu stood in his original spot quietly for a while and looked at Tuanzi, who had appeared at the side without him knowing. Take good care of her. Tuanzi nodded sensibly, which was rare for her. Rongxiu then turned and left. Xue followed closely behind. Walking out of Zhaoyu Hall, Rongxiu looked into the distance and in a certain direction. If you remember correctly, Huayang Hall should be over there. It was also the place where Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing were imprisoned. Rongxiu thought for a while and turned around to leave the palace. Chu Luiyue had a long and messy dream. In the dream, She seemed to be competing with someone in order to win first place on the green cloud roll. The other party's face and figure were very blurry, but his strength was extremely strong. She lost again and again, and lost again and again. Sometimes it was very quiet, sometimes it was very noisy, as if many people were watching and cheering. She wanted to see the other party's face clearly, but she could not. After some time, even she could not remember how many times she had competed. She finally won the competition again. She was very happy, and the person opposite her seemed to be very happy too. Someone was shouting something around them. She vaguely heard that it seemed to be you. The person opposite her suddenly took a step forward. It was as if he had suddenly broken through a layer of fog. His figure gradually became clear. It was a young man wearing a black brocade robe with a green jade belt around his waist, easily outlining the man's tall figure with wide shoulders and narrow waist. He seemed to have said something to her. The surroundings were quiet for a moment, and then there was a burst of enthusiastic cheers and screams, as if it was boiling. As for his face, it was gradually revealed. Whoosh! Chu Luiwei suddenly opened her eyes. Her body was covered in cold sweat, and her heart was beating so fast that her ears were numb. She calmed down for a while before she realized that she was dreaming. Dumpling flew over and rubbed against her face intimately. Chu Luiwei hugged Dumpling in her arms, and the waves in her heart gradually calmed down. After waking up, everything in the dream began to quickly forget. That man's figure seemed very familiar. But that face, in the end, she did not see it clearly. An absurd thought was born in her heart. She vaguely felt that the man in the dream who was competing with her seemed to be the one on the octagonal pavilion on the cliff, and he was extremely similar to the first master. Night fell. The 100 Herbs building was already closed, and Yuling was checking things on the 3rd floor. Suddenly, he heard something. When he turned around, he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out. "Master!" He hurriedly bowed. "Master, why are you now?" Rongxiu waved his hand. "I'm just here to take something." Yuling heaved a sigh of relief. God knows how he felt when he turned around and saw his master standing there. "Yes," Yuling hurriedly responded. Seeing Rongxiu walk inside, he was still very surprised. Now, his master's name was well known in West Hill. Everyone knew that the new emperor had a fiancée. Although he was born in Yaochun, he defeated Zhao Zicheng. "Did you pick it from Adam?" Yuling followed him and asked carefully. In fact, when he learned that Chu Luiwei was actually from Shangguanyu, he was also very shocked. He was wondering why his master returned to Yaochun back then. So that was the reason. Rongxiu nodded and walked to an inconspicuous shelf. On it was a fist-sized, inconspicuous pine stone jade box. Perhaps it was because it had not been touched for a long time, but it was covered with a faint layer of dust. Rongxiu did not seem to care and raised his hand to take it. Yuling was slightly surprised. So this was what his master wanted. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 926. Yuling wanted to ask something, but he didn't. Rongxiu had just put away the green pine stone jade box when there was a knock on the door. "Master, I have something to report." It was Yumo's voice. Yuling looked at Rongxiu. Rongxiu said lightly, "Just come in." Yuling then understood that it was his master who called Yumo over. Yumo pushed the door open and entered. When he saw Yuling, he nodded gently and then bowed to Rongxiu. "Master, you guessed right. Jiang Yuqing has contacted that person again." Yuling was shocked when he heard this and immediately said, "Master, I'll go and guard outside." Rongxiu nodded, and Yuling hurriedly left. When he left, he even carefully closed the door. Walking out of the door, Yuling's expression was slightly serious. It seemed that his master was going to make a move. Umo had been staying in West Hill during this period, secretly investigating Jiang Yuqing's matter. After the matter was exposed some time ago, the entire Jiang family was executed, and Jiang Yuqing was also imprisoned. Umo waited for a long time before he finally found this clue. The time should be yesterday. A look of disdain flashed across Umo's eyes. He chose this time because everyone in the Jiang family is dead, and everyone has lowered their guard against him. This Jiang Yuqing is really selfish. In order to survive, he is willing to let the entire family die with him. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. He has always only cared about himself, so it's not surprising that he would do such a thing. Jiang Yuqing thought that he had climbed up the social ladder, but he was just too smart. Have you found out the identity of that person? Umo paused and shook his head. I only found out that the other party is Jiang Yuqing's backer, but I didn't find out his identity. Rong Xiu didn't seem to care. If it's so easy for you to find out, then I'm too incompetent. Jiang Yuqing is now trapped in Huayang Palace. How did the news get out? Yumo's expression became serious. There's a special way to send messages in Huayang Palace. Mu Manor. The next day, the morning sun shone in through the window. Mu Qing's eyes moved, and he finally opened them. His vision was blurry at first, and then he subconsciously closed his eyes. You're awake? A cold voice came from his side. Mu Qinghe turned to look and saw a familiar face. Jian Fengqi crossed his arms as he sneered at him. There were 2 dark circles under his eyes, and he looked a little haggard, as if he hadn't rested well. Estime to saves to ts, from now on to ses. Understand. To him, tis t, s twos t tis t, his is twos her, s is ses to ses. He knew his own body. Jian Fengqi didn't need to. Hearing this, Jian Fengqi was instantly infuriated, and he couldn't wait to go forward and beat him up. Thinking that he was the one who saved Mu Qinghe, he suppressed his anger and pointed at Mu Qinghe angrily. You're really something. I must have had nothing better to do to help you. Mu Qinghe leaned against the bed and closed her eyes, seemingly unmoved. You're not the only one I owe my life to. Chu Youyuez was already too much for him to pay off. Jian Fengqi suppressed his anger and didn't want to continue arguing with him. He stepped forward, pulled a chair, and sat opposite Mu Qinghe. Speak. What's wrong with your body? Mu Qinghe said indifferently. "'Tis just an old injury." Jian Fengqi sneered. Do you really think I'm a celestial physician for nothing? The poison in your body is quite old, isn't it? It's extremely cold and has already penetrated deep into your organs. Even if you can't clear it, you'll be dead by now. This kind of poison doesn't exist in the West Hill, nor in the entire Tianling. Don't tell me you don't know. Mu Qinghe didn't say anything, as if she couldn't be bothered to explain. The two fell into a silent confrontation. After a while, Jian Fengqi stood up. Don't worry. I can't do anything about your poison, but that doesn't mean others can't. I'll go to the palace and ask someone. He turned around and left. Just as he was about to step out of the door, he heard a voice behind him. Wait! Chongshu Pavilion. Yi Ran arrived at the herb garden early in the morning, ready to take care of the herbs. But when she arrived, she saw that someone was already there. She took a closer look and exclaimed in surprise, You're a genius. Pavilion Master? Yuchi Song cut off the withered leaves of the Longting Ganoderma in her hand and straightened up. She smiled kindly at Yi Ran. Yi Ran walked over and asked curiously, Pavilion Master, why are you here personally? Yuchi Song smiled. I have nothing to do anyway, so I came to take a look. Yi Ran squinted her eyes. You miss Lu Yu? Most of these herbs were taken care of by Lu Yu. It wasn't hard to understand why the Pavilion Master was here. Yuchi Song smiled and gently knocked on her head. You can call her that in our Chongshu Pavilion, but you can't call her that outside. She had regained her identity. Moreover, she was the emperor and the supreme existence of the Tianling dynasty. Naturally, she couldn't be treated as casually as before. Yi Ran stuck out her tongue. Ran knows. It took her a long time to accept this matter. Pavilion Master, if you miss her, why don't you just go to the palace? After all, the Pavilion Master was Lu Yu's master, wasn't she? Yuchi Song sighed and shook her head. She must be very busy this time. Besides, Pavilion Master, Lu Xiao suddenly ran over quickly. Pavilion Master, Qi Dai said he remembered what happened in Nanjiang. Yuchi Song's eyes lit up. Let's go. Shilling City seemed to gradually calm down. The Jiang family and the Xiahou family, who had once been arrogant and insufferably arrogant, were completely destroyed overnight. In addition, many clans and people were also implicated and robbed in this turmoil. Days passed, and these shocking events seemed to gradually subside. People were very forgetful. Not long after, Xiling City had already regained its usual liveliness. It was as if those things had never happened, and the strong smell of blood after the beheading finally dissipated completely. Ordinary people continued their lives as usual. It was as if they had long forgotten about Shang Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing, who were imprisoned. However, in a place where everyone couldn't see, there was a surging undercurrent. A month passed in the blink of an eye. It was almost the 1-month period agreed on the note. In Zhaoyu Palace, Chu Luiyue was cultivating. She sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees. Vigorous force surged wildly. The force of heaven and earth in the surroundings began to pour into her body. She was preparing to break through. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 927. In this 1 month, she sparred with Rong Xiu almost every day, and her battle prowess increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, every time her battle prowess increased, Rong Xiu's battle prowess would increase as well, and he would always be able to suppress her. He seemed to be very clear about what level he should maintain his battle prowess at, so that he could stimulate her potential to the greatest extent without causing her any harm. But actually, this was the most terrifying part. This was enough to prove that Rong Xiu's control of force had reached an unimaginable level. Chu Luiyue did not believe it at first, but later on, she realized in despair that Rong Xiu, she really could not detect his true strength. Every time she thought that she had found his weakness and could defeat him, she realized that he still had plenty of room to maneuver. Thus, slowly, Chu Luiyue also realized that it would take a long time before she could completely defeat him. But this did not affect her. Instead, it made her even more determined to fight. And gradually, she also realized that this kind of exchange of pointers was actually more effective than the bitter training in the Red Moon Desert. Compared to those puppets, Rong Xiu was much better in all aspects, and because he could use force, his battle prowess was stronger. Chu Luiyue thought about it day and night, pondering on how to defeat him by a move or two. Under such circumstances, her battle prowess had unknowingly increased by leaps and bounds, and she had been improving rapidly. So, after a month, she finally touched the threshold of a breakthrough. Previously in the Red Moon Desert, she had already broken through to the middle stage of the 6th level. If she broke through again now, she would be at the peak of the 6th level. Chu Luiyue held her breath and waited, calming her heart and looking inside. In her dantian, on top of the water droplet, 6 veins floated quietly. The first 5 veins were extremely beautiful, only the last one was slightly dim. The force that entered her body washed through the yuan meridians in her limbs and bones, and finally all gathered here, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea. It continuously devoured the surging power. At the same time, the 5 treasures were connected, and the aura contained within was continuously increasing. Time passed quickly. At a certain moment, Chu Luiyue finally felt that the time had come. He gathered all the force in his dantian together and fiercely slammed it toward the water droplet. Boom! The 2 forces fiercely collided. Chu Luiyue's body exploded with a roar. After that, the sound of something breaking resounded. Crack! It was as if an invisible barrier had been broken. In the next moment, Chu Luiyue could clearly see that the 6th line seemed to have shed its gray layer, gradually revealing a gorgeous and intense color. Wong! A wave of fluctuation spread out from above. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes, which were originally as black and clean as black jade, now seemed to be burning with 2 balls of fire. One was as red as the blazing sun. One was as transparent as the cold moon. It was as if the 2 forces had perfectly fused together, erupting with an unparalleled aura. At this point, the peak of the sixth step, Shang Guanyu had just walked out of Zhaoyu Hall when he sensed a terrifying aura erupting from it. He quickened his pace and walked inside. That power seemed to be coming from Yu-Er's bedroom. In front of the tightly shut door stood a tall and straight figure. It was Rong Xiao. At this time, he was raising his hand to set up a layer of bounded domain outside the bedroom, which easily blocked all the fluctuations inside. Like raindrops falling into the sea, it did not cause any waves. Shang Guanyu's pupils shrank. Although he was not as talented as Yu-Er, his strength was not bad. After recuperating during this period of time, he had returned to the peak of the eighth step. Otherwise, he would not have been able to ascend to the throne. But when he saw this scene, he suddenly realized that Rong Xiao's strength was definitely above his. And this also made him more convinced of his previous guess. Hearing the noise, Rong Xiao turned around. When he saw Shang Guanyu, he smiled slightly and bowed to him. Shang Guanyu looked at him with a complicated expression. "Are you protecting you?" Rong Xiao nodded. She has just broken through to the peak of the sixth step. Although he had expected this before, hearing Rong Xiao's confirmation with his own ears, Shang Guanyu was still quite excited. Really? He looked at the closed door with eager and proud eyes. He remembered that when Yu-Er came back, she seemed to be only at the middle of the sixth step. He did not expect her to break through to the peak so quickly. During this period of time, thanks to your help, right? Shang Guanyu glanced at Rong Xiao and asked. He knew that Rong Xiao went to the palace at a fixed time every day to accompany Yu-Er to practice. Obviously, Rong Xiao's contribution could not go unnoticed for Yu-Er to be able to break through so smoothly. Rong Xiao's smile deepened. Her talent is outstanding. To her, this is not a difficult thing to do. His words and actions showed that he did not mean to take credit for himself. Shang Guanyu did not speak again. Breaking through from the middle of the sixth step to the peak seemed to be a small step, but in fact there was a huge gap in the middle. Even cultivators with the Daijing Yuan Meridian could not smoothly break through without at least half a year. Yu-Er's speed was almost comparable to that of when she had the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. During this period of time, he had secretly inquired about Yu-Er's past. He learned that she was born a loser with a damaged Yuan Meridian and reached this step in just a year. In comparison, her cultivation speed was even faster than that of the past. At this moment, with a creak, the door finally opened. Rong Xiao waved his sleeve, and the ward disappeared in an instant. It turned into countless light spots and quickly disappeared in midair. Shang Guanyu could not help but look at Rong Xiao again, and became more curious about his identity and background. Just what kind of powerful force could nurture such a person? These thoughts flashed through his mind, and Chu Luiyue had already walked out. She was a little surprised to see Shang Guanyu. Father? Shang Guanyu looked at her with relief. I haven't congratulated our Yu-Er for breaking through again. Chu Luiyue's eyes were bright, and she was in high spirits. She took a few steps forward. Thank you, Father. What brings you here today? Shang Guanyu nodded and took out an invitation from his bosom. The Baiming dynasty sent a letter. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. It's coming. Digression, updated at 6 o'clock p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 928. She reached out and took the letter, seemingly unintentionally asking, We don't have much contact with the Baiming dynasty. Why would they write us a letter? Shang Guanyu shook his head. I haven't opened it yet. Chu Luiyue glanced at the invitation. There was a line of words on it. To the Emperor of the Tianling dynasty. Her eyebrows twitched. The handwriting was exactly the same as the one on the note. She suppressed her racing heart and opened the invitation. It was an invitation. Chu Luiyue quickly finished reading and knitted her brows slightly. Shang Guanyu asked worriedly, What's wrong? Did something happen? Chu Luiyue handed the invitation over. The Baiming dynasty has invited the other 4 dynasties to Lin State. Why are we going to Lin State? Lin State was the capital of the Baiming dynasty. Although the dynasties in Heaven's Canopy occasionally communicated with each other. They didn't have much contact with each other. It was extremely rare to invite so many people from Dynasty to the same place all of a sudden. Shang Guanyu asked as he read through the invitation. Immediately, he exclaimed in shock. The ancient Phoenix Mountain is opening. That's right. The letter said that the ancient Phoenix Mountain would open in half a month. They thought that the Biming dynasty alone wouldn't be able to handle it, so they invited several dynasties to go together. Chu Luiyue frowned. The ancient Phoenix Mountain was a mountain outside Lin State City. It was where the Taizu of the Biming dynasty tried to break through to the God realm. Unlike Shangguan Jing, their great ancestor had indeed succeeded in doing so back then. Since then, the entire ancient Phoenix Mountain had become the divine mountain of the Biming dynasty. Although it was also something that happened 1,000 years ago, it was because of this that the entire Dark North dynasty seemed to be superior to others for many years. The surrounding dynasties were more polite to the Biming dynasty. The invitation was written by the crown prince of the Biming dynasty. I heard that he's the only son of the Biming dynasty's old emperor. He's very talented and has always been favored. Now, half of the imperial power of the Biming dynasty is in his hands. Shang Guanyu glanced at the letter and pondered for a moment. Regardless of whether it's for the ancient Phoenix Mountain or for the sake of the Dark North dynasty, the people from the other dynasties will probably go. Chu Luiyue nodded. That was what she thought too. Shang Guanyu pondered for a moment and asked doubtfully, however, the other 3 dynasties are all neighbors of the Biming dynasty, and they have frequent interactions with each other. Only our Tianling dynasty is far away from them, and we have almost never had such interactions with them before. Why would they write such an invitation? Chu Luiyue's eyes darkened. It turned out that the people who kidnapped Chu Ning were from the Dark North dynasty. Moreover, if he guessed correctly, the mastermind behind all of this was the so-called Prince Biming, Jun Jiuqing. In the end, he was here for her. However, she had never been to the Biming dynasty and did not know this Jun Jiuqing. Why would he do this? Whether it's right or wrong, we'll know when we go. Chu Luiyue said firmly. Shang Guanyu hesitated for a moment. Why don't I go on your behalf this time? Chu Luiyue shook her head. It says that the emperors of the various dynasties are invited to bring their people. They must already know that their daughter has ascended to the throne. If you go on their behalf, I'm afraid they will criticize you. Shang Guanyu was actually a little worried, but it was precisely because this letter was so obviously targeted that he had some misgivings. For some reason, he felt that this invitation was not friendly. Chu Luiyue saw the worry between his eyebrows and smiled. She raised her hand and smoothed the wrinkles between his eyebrows. All right, father, are you still worried about your daughter's work? Moreover, they said that the ancient Phoenix Mountain was going to open this time, and they invited the various dynasties to bring some of their top experts and outstanding talents. With so many people going together, it would be a grand occasion. Nothing would happen. Shang Guanyu did not know whether to laugh or cry at her actions. You are smart. I'm not worried about anything you do. Since you've made up your mind, then pack up these few days and choose some people to go. Chu Luiyue nodded. When the ancient Phoenix Mountain opens, the rare treasures of heaven and earth will appear. I heard that there will be a force tide. It's an extremely rare cultivation opportunity for any cultivator. I don't want to miss it. Shang Guanyu looked at her serious expression, and his heart skipped a beat. All right, just do whatever you want to do. I'll always be behind you and support you. The Dark North dynasty sent an invitation to Chu Luiyue to bring people to Lin province to witness the opening of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Soon, the news spread among the various sects and families. Everyone was excited and eager to go. The Dark North dynasty was an existence that had produced a god-tier expert, and the ancient Phoenix Mountain was a precious place. Which cultivator in the world did not want to go and see it? In addition, people from several other dynasties would also go together, which made it even more grand. Even if it was just a look, it would be a precious life experience. To be able to meet so many top experts and outstanding geniuses, one could imagine how lucky it was. For a moment, The list of candidates became the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone wanted to know who Chu Luiyue would choose to go with her this time. In the study of Zhaoyu Palace, Chu Luiyue was sitting behind the table, flipping through the list that she had just written. The invitation said that she could bring a total of 10 people. 5 top experts, 5 outstanding geniuses. This number was actually not a small number. After all, other than the Tianling dynasty, people from the other 3 dynasties would also go. Needless to say, there would also be people from the Dark North dynasty. Since the quota was limited, the choice of the candidates became extremely important. Chu Luiyue first drafted a list for review. On one hand, the people going had to be strong enough. On the other hand, she had to leave enough people in West Hill in case someone started to cause trouble when she was not around. Moreover, there were so many spots in total. People from various sects and aristocratic families were also keeping a close eye on them, so she had to weigh the pros and cons. She stared at the list in her hand for a long while, then picked up her pen and made a few changes on it before settling on the final list. 10 days later, the Tianling dynasty was not close to the Dark North dynasty. Even if they used the teleportation portal, it would take a few days of travel time. Therefore, it was time for them to depart after briefing her on the matters in West Hill. She turned her gaze and looked at the invitation card next to her. Her expression turned serious. Jun Jiuqing. Could it be that they used to know each other? Thud! A sound suddenly came from behind her. She turned around and saw that Dumpling had accidentally knocked a few books off the bookshelf. She got up, walked over, and picked up the books. When she picked up the last book, she was about to put it back in order when she realized that it was a little different. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and she flipped open the book. Immediately, a look of shock flashed across her eyes. Her handwriting was on it. However, she had no recollection of writing these things. Digression, I'm a little stuck. The 5th update is around 6:30 p.m. Originally, I wanted to add more chapters today, but I had something to do at the last minute and had to go out. So, I'll add more chapters tomorrow. Chapter 929. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and carefully flipped through the book in her hand from the first page. As she flipped through the pages, the shock and doubt in her heart increased instead of decreasing. The things written on it seemed to be chaotic and incoherent, but there was a vague pattern to it. It was like some kind of secret language. Dumpling seemed to have noticed that something was wrong. It squatted aside obediently, looking at the book for a while and looking at her for a while. Its eyes were rolling. Chu Luiyue stood there and spent quite some time before she finished reading the entire book. When she flipped to the last page, there was finally a signature that she could understand. Xian Yuan calendar, year 3572, return at the beginning of autumn. Chu Luiyue stared at the line of words for a long time. Xian Yuan calendar. There was no such era name in the 1,000-year history of the Tianling dynasty. Moreover, as far as she knew, some of the surrounding dynasties did not have an era as long as 3,000 years. Then, the time recorded in this sentence, whose era name did it follow, and which day did it represent? Return at the beginning of autumn. Could this be referring to leaving on the day of autumn? But this was her handwriting, so where did it go? Chu Luiyue's eyes seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog, and she could not see clearly. She had a premonition that this book was most likely something like a diary. However, she couldn't remember when she had written these things down, nor did she know what the contents were. That sentence was written on the last page. Could it represent some kind of end? Chu Luiyue was puzzled. She flipped through it repeatedly, but she had no clue. This was written by her, and she should be the one who put it here. However, she had no impression of it at all. Perhaps it has something to do with that memory, Chu Luiyue muttered softly. At this moment, there was a fluctuation in her body. This fluctuation came from the top of the black pyramid. The seal on it was intact, and it seemed that something inside wanted to break out. Chu Luiyue was shocked. This commotion seemed to be caused by the book in her hand. However, after a short while, the fluctuation stopped and returned to normal. Chu Luiyue stood quietly and pondered for a long time. Taizu, she suddenly spoke. Little girl, what's the matter? Taizu's voice was clearly heard. Chu Lua nodded. There's something I'd like to ask you. You said that the soul of the Shangwan clan was sealed in the black pyramid in my body. That's right. What happened? What I want to ask is, you should know who this soul belongs to, right? The Taizu suddenly fell silent. Chu Luiwei felt as if his heart had been hammered by a heavy hammer. Her lips moved as she whispered, "Don't worry. Inside is my soul, isn't it?" The study fell into a dead silence. After Chu Luiwei finished speaking, Taizu did not reply for a long time. Night fell, and a bright moon hung high in the sky. It gently waved and sprinkled in through the window, outlining the slender and tall woman's long shadow. The moonlight shone on her porcelain-like face, making it half bright and half dark. Her eyelids were slightly lowered, and the expression in her eyes was dark and gloomy, like a bottomless lake, mysterious and unfathomable. The cool night breeze blew, and the corners of her clothes fluttered. After an unknown period of time, Taizu finally let out a long sigh. Actually, I'm not 100% sure, but I vaguely feel that it seems to be Chu Luiwei was his descendant, so he was naturally the most familiar with this. When they first met, he knew that the soul of the Shangwan clan was sealed in the Black Pyramid. Otherwise, it would not have been able to break through the attack of the long Yuan sword and enter below. At first, he only thought that it was the soul of a descendant and did not pay much attention to it. However, he gradually realized that it seemed to have something to do with Chu Luiwei. However, because he did not have any evidence, he did not tell her. He did not expect her to bring it up this time. Did you discover something? Taizu asked. Chu Luiwei nodded, then shook her head. I only caught a glimpse of the tip of the iceberg. If she had not flipped through the book and caused the Black Pyramid to move, she would not have thought of this. To think that she had been thinking that this might be an ancestor's. It's a pity that the seal on it is too strong, and I can't open it for the time being. Chu Luiwei felt a little regretful, and she suddenly felt a little unwilling and puzzled. If this guess was true, then who was the one who specially stored it in this pyramid and hid it in the Imperial tomb of Yaochun? Also, the first master had said that this thing was related to his wife and was only temporarily stored with her. What was going on? Since his wife was involved, it was impossible that he did not know what was inside, right? Chu Luiwei suddenly felt an urge to see the first master again. She wanted to ask him personally what was going on in front of him. The person who left this seal is extremely powerful. Unless you break through to the 9th stage, you can only break it. Otherwise, Taizu actually had a headache. Chu Luiwei was the descendant he doted on the most. If he could help her, he would definitely help her without holding back. Chu Luiwei paused for a moment and put the book away. She would definitely solve all these mysteries. Knock, knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Chu Luiwei woke up from her thoughts and walked over to open the door. The person who came was Rong Xiao. At this time, it was already late at night. He was dressed in white and covered in cold moonlight. He looked at her, his eyes deep, as if they were sprinkling the sky with starlight. Chu Luiwei blinked, then reacted and reached out to pull him. Rong Xiao, why are you here now? After receiving the invitation during the day, he left. She didn't expect him to come back at this time. Rong Xiao held her hand and strode into the study with his long legs. I'm here to bid you farewell, said Rong Xiao straightforwardly. Chu Luiwei asked in surprise. Now, where are you going? Rong Xiao's lips curled up into a smile as he nonchalantly said, something happened in the clan, and I need to go back to deal with it. So he was going back to his mother's clan. Chu Luiwei felt as if a piece of her heart had been dug out. The two of them were separated more than they were together. It wasn't easy for them to be together for a month, but they were going to be separated again. Perhaps the disappointment in her eyes was too obvious. Rong Xiao tucked the strands of hair by her cheeks behind her ears, cupped her face, and planted a kiss on it. Don't worry, I'll go to the Dark North Dynasty to find you soon. Chu Luiwei hugged his thin waist and said in a muffled voice, Really? Rong Xiao pinched her white and delicate earlobe and laughed softly, but his tone was gentle and doting. Of course. Someone was arrogant and presumptuous. How could he sit back and do nothing? When the time comes, I'll give you a big gift. Digression. Tomorrow is the diligent February. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.